Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto disappears with Kurama return 5-year letter. Before I start, please support for more amazing content, and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by MssPerfect and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1. Hated. Always hated. Naruto didn't understand why the villagers hated him, or how they had come to despise him so much. He guessed it probably had something to do with the thing lurking within him. The weird presence he felt every time he got angry or when he was sad. It wasn't fair though. He was getting punished for something he isn't, something he didn't want to become. The Kyuubi is the monster, the demon, not him. He, Naruto Uzumaki, was an orphan, a helpless 5-year-old who didn't have much knowledge of its prisoner or anything for that matter. What the Kyuubi did in his past life, Naruto did not know, but whatever it was, it made everyone hate him. Naruto pushed a strand of his spiky blonde hair away from his face and looked down from the tree he was currently hiding in. The villagers stood beneath him, hatred written all over their faces. They had brought weapons this time and he noticed that a long time ago. It should still be okay though. All he has to do is stay quiet in his hiding spot and make sure they don't find him, and then after they are all gone later, he would climb down slowly and run home as fast as his little legs can carry him. The poor kid didn't think he could take another beating for the day anyways. His body was already bruised and the cut on his forehead was bleeding fast. The warm, thick and sticky blood made their way down his forehead and to the bridge of his nose. Naruto, without thinking, wiped his hand across his forehead, making the blood stick to his hand like glue. Naruto stared at his hand for a moment. Red. It was red, at least his blood was still the same color, which meant he wasn't an alien or a monster. Naruto turned away, ignoring the sight. It wasn't only his forehead that was bleeding. Some of the wounds had already healed and were replaced with soft tan skin while the others were still processing. Naruto leaned down and stared as the wound on his leg slowly began to heal. It wasn't the first time he saw this, and he was pretty sure it wouldn't be the last, but every time, he still found it interesting to watch. He liked how the skin slowly came back together, and how the steam rises up. He liked how the wound disappears. It was all so interesting to him. Naruto smiled weakly and pulled his knees up to his chest, wrapping his arms around them. He was cold, bruised, bloody, hungry and alone. Maybe not alone, but the Kyuubi's presence was close to nothing anyways. It was getting cold and the young blonde knew the villagers weren't going to leave any sooner. His clothes were all torn and he wanted to go home. He just wanted to go home and cover himself with his blanket, if it was still there and not burnt like it was 2 days ago. Home wasn't probably the safest place to be right now, but he didn't care. There would be nobody there to protect him. This is not fair. It's all your fault. Naruto buried his face on his lap and could feel hot tears streaming down his rosy cheeks. He sat there and sobbed quietly, forgetting about the vengeful villagers who still stood beneath him. I want to go home. I wish my daddy was here. He'll show them. Naruto had drifted off to sleep without realizing. He was woken up by the light raining, and when he opened his eyes, he saw that the sky was a gloomy color. Slowly Naruto stood up and looked down from the tree he was hiding in. The villagers had gone, no doubt chased away by the rain. Naruto smiled sadly at himself and carefully climbed down, careful as to not slip and hurt himself. As soon as he was safely on the ground, he started running. His house wasn't far away, and if he ran fast enough he could get there without anyone spotting him. The rain has now picked up its pace and Naruto's hair went flat against his skull, his torn clothes sticking to his skin, but he didn't stop running. Naruto noticed, as he passed a few shops and houses, that the whole village was lit up. The place was beautiful at night, and he admired it, but there wasn't a single soul to be seen around. Something was wrong and Naruto could feel it. He came to an abrupt halt when the rain suddenly stopped. The clouds cleared away and a dazzling moon appeared. It bathed the whole village with its bright moonlight, and soon people started to come out of their houses and shops. Soon the quiet village was filled with noises and chattering. Naruto's eyes widened and he stared in shock. What was going on? He turned around on his heels and prepared himself for another run. Not wasting another second, Naruto began running back in the direction he had just previously come from. He didn't know where he was running or why he was even running. Naruto looked behind him expecting a mob of villagers to be chasing him, but to his surprise, no one was following him. But he didn't stop running though, and that's when he bumped into someone. Naruto fell back down, his butt hitting the wet ground hard. He winced and looked up, preparing an apology. His mouth opened slightly and his eyes widened as he stared at the stranger in front of him. The man that stood in front of Naruto was tall and had the unwrinkled complexion of a young man, probably in his early 20s. Naruto couldn't tell the exact color of his hair due to the moonlight, but from the look of it, he guessed it was sunbeam blonde. It was naturally spiked, and he had 2 bangs that fell to the side of his cheeks, framing his fine figures. His bright blue eyes, which were now a lighter shade of gray from the moonlight, looked down at Naruto. Naruto gulped when he saw that the man carried a kanta. He just wished he wasn't planning on using it. I'm sorry about that, the man began, and Naruto stared in shock. Was he apologizing? That can't be right, he must be hearing things. No one ever apologizes to him. Naruto got up and took a step away from the man. The man frowned and blinked, seeing Naruto's reaction. I didn't hurt you, did I? The stranger asked, and Naruto took another step back, his leg muscles tensing up and preparing to run yet again. What if this man attacked him? Naruto shook his head at the question, and he thought he saw the man sigh with relief. Well, that's a relief. What is your name? The man questioned, and Naruto raised an eyebrow at him. Name? Naruto thought for a moment, and when he didn't answer, the man spoke again. You do have a name, don't you? Naruto thought for a few more seconds. Should he tell him his name? Can he trust him? Naruto stood there for a minute and began to wonder. What was he still doing here? Why wasn't he running or begging for his life? And most of all, why hadn't the man attacked yet? It's Naruto replied, and the stranger looked at him. The boy sounded scared, almost terrified. Do you have a last name? The man questioned again, this time smiling at Naruto. Again Naruto went into thinking mode. Did he have a last name? He was pretty sure he did, but now he couldn't remember what it was. Naruto glanced at the man in front of him suspiciously before shaking his head. Why was the man being kind to him? Maybe his kindness was just a trick. I am not sure, the man heard Naruto mumble. The older blonde just blinked and stared at the kid in front of him, scratching the back of his head nervously. Well, are you lost then? No. Where are your parents? I don't have any. The man stopped and examined the younger blonde. Poor kid. He felt pity for the kid. No wonder, he looked messed up right now. What happened to his clothes? He must be freezing. The child looked so young, and here he is, wondering about all by himself. Come on, let's get you some new clothes, you must be freezing in those. The man nodded his head towards Naruto's torn clothing. Naruto looked at himself, then back at the man. When the man moved towards Naruto, he shuffled away from him slowly. The man frowned and looked at Naruto. I won't hurt you, he assured, and extending out his hand, having figured out that the kid was very protective of himself. He wondered why. Naruto stared at the man's hand and then back at his grinning face. Naruto felt a warm feeling rush over him. For once he met someone who didn't want to attack him apart from the old man, Iruka-sensei and Kakashi-sensei. With hesitation, Naruto took the man's hand. It was warm and Naruto liked it. The man smiled and started walking while holding Naruto's hand. I'm Minato Namikaze, by the way, but you can call me Yandeme-sama, the man said. Naruto nodded. Namikaze? Naruto thought, where did he hear that name from before? Chapter 2. Minato stole glances at Naruto when he thought the younger blonde wasn't looking. There was just something about this child, something he couldn't quite put his hands on. His appearances were shocking, in a good way though, and the similarities the two had were enough to scare him. God, how the kid looked exactly like him. It was like looking at a mini version of yourself. Minato didn't know he had a little brother, and a cute one at that too. Sadly, his parents had died a long time ago, and he knew that couldn't be possible. What was it about the kid that made him wonder? Naruto was a strange kid, in a good way. Minato took another glance at Naruto again, and when the child met his gaze, he turned away. Those eyes. They were like his own but different at the same time. They were filled with so much hurt and sadness and held so many emotions. Minato felt like he had a connection with the kid somehow. Naruto was so quiet, so spaced out. If Minato hadn't heard him speak earlier, he would have thought the kid had no voice. He barely talked. He was very polite though. He answered every single question Minato asked him to the best of his knowledge, and that was all. Other than that, he didn't say anything else. It was like he was scared. Scared of what though? Minato couldn't stop wondering. Naruto was hungry and Minato could tell, but the kid refused to eat or drink anything he offered him. So I guess you're not going to drink that either? Minato questioned after what seemed an eternity of silence, nodding his head at the cup of hot milk that was set before Naruto. Naruto had barely touched it. Naruto stared at the hot milk, which was now getting cold, and shook his head slightly. Minato sighed. He scrunched up his nose and started to think. Maybe he wasn't offering him the right food or drinks. How was he supposed to know? He never took care of kids before. Maybe Naruto knew what he wanted. Naruto looked at the man. He could try running, but sadly he knew that his tiny legs weren't going to do him any good. There was no way he could outrun that man. Maybe he should just stay put and do as the man says. Or just answer the questions as best he could. Maybe the man would be kind enough to let him go. Naruto glanced at the man again. Why does he look so familiar? Naruto didn't own a mirror at home, but looking at the man's face, they look almost like brothers. Naruto didn't have a brother though, and he knew that. He wanted one, wished for one even, but still he was alone. Sasuke had a big brother, and Naruto saw how happy they were together. It made him feel sad, and as much as he was happy for the Uchihas, he couldn't help but feel jealous and left out. Besides, why was he offering all these food and drinks to him? Naruto was hungry, and he wanted so badly to eat something since he hadn't ate anything for almost 2 days, but he was afraid the man might have done something to them, maybe added poison. Back at his house, his shelves were filled with empty boxes that once used to contain his favorite food. Ramen. The Anbu-chans hadn't bothered bringing him food. Why would they? The old man was too busy and didn't come to check up on him, so there wasn't anyone left to check his food supplies. Iruka-sensei was too busy at the academy, and Kakashi only came to visit him once in every 2 weeks. Minato scratched the back of his head, something he usually did when he was nervous or uncomfortable. Is there anything you would like then? He asked, hoping the kid had a favorite food or something. This was harder than he thought. He stared at Naruto, who just pulled the blanket over himself tightly. When they had arrived, Minato went over to Kakashi's house to borrow some of his old clothes of when he was about Naruto's age to lend to the boy, but when he came back, Naruto refused to wear them. Maybe the kid was shy or something. Naruto looked up with those cute baby blue eyes of his and Minato couldn't help smiling. Why are you doing all of this for me? Naruto suddenly asked out of the blue, and Minato frowned. That wasn't quite the answer he was hoping for. What was the kid talking about? He was only doing what a mere human with a heart would do. It wasn't anything special. Minato shot Naruto his best grin, and the boy turned away. What are you talking about? I'm only doing what anybody else would do if they were in my shoes, kid, Minato replied, not wanting to get any special credit, and let out a small laugh. Another thing he did when he was nervous or uncomfortable. Naruto gazed down at the hard ground beneath him. He was still convinced that the man's kindness was just a trick, a way to get closer to him, but he wasn't going to fall for it this time. That's what most of them usually said. And they all lied. Maybe the man didn't know who he is. Naruto was sure that if he did, he would be chasing him out right now. Or worse, be hurting him physically. When Naruto spoke again, his voice was as cold as ice and the words broke Minato's heart. No, not everyone else. People treat me like dirt, like a monster. Why should you be any different? Naruto spoke, his eyes shimmering with tears. Minato just stared at Naruto, shocked, anger running through him. Who would do such a thing? How could they be so cruel to a 5-year-old, nonetheless? Minato examined the blonde-haired boy and smiled. Because Naruto, I'm not like everyone else, Minato replied, hoping it would help. If what the kid had just said was true, then maybe Minato ought to go and show those heartless bastards a thing or two, whoever they are. Naruto eyed him more closely. His deep ocean blue eyes seemed to bore into him. See through him. Why should I believe you? Naruto questioned. Minato sighed and rubbed his temples. Explaining things to a 5-year-old is not easy, and he just found that out the hard way. What was he supposed to say to that? Well, you see, kid, I have nothing against you as far as I'm concerned, and I have no reason to hurt you, Minato spoke. Naruto looked up at Minato once again and his eyes saddened. So he was right, the man had no knowledge of him whatsoever. Naruto rubbed at his eyes and then went into silence once again. Minato sat there staring at Naruto for a while before getting up. Come on, kid, I have to take you to the Hokage, Minato said. Naruto looked up at him, his eyes suddenly gleaming with happiness. The old man? He missed the old man even though it had been only 2 weeks. It felt like forever to him. Naruto got up and for the first time since he had bumped into Minato, he let a small smile cross his face. Minato started walking out of the orphanage and gestured for Naruto to follow him, which he did. As Naruto left the room he was in, he noticed a few kids playing together outside. He stopped and stared at them. Were they orphans too, like him? As they walked through the village, heading towards the Hokage office, Naruto kept close to Minato. He kept his head down and tried to avoid eye contact with anyone, but to his surprise, no one was looking at him, or glaring at him for that matter. Around him everyone was busy and chattering away. It was like he didn't even exist. Yesterday when Naruto had bumped into Minato it was dark, and even though the moon was shining bright he didn't look around properly. Now, as he looked around more closely he noticed that something was different. The village was slightly different than he last remembered. Or maybe it was the same, he couldn't tell since he barely even comes outside much, and even if he did, the villagers won't let him have a pleasurable time to look around. Minato suddenly stopped, making Naruto bump into him again. Naruto looked up and Minato smiled at him. We're here. Naruto's body surged with happiness, and he flung the door open, running in, leaving Minato to blink and stare at his back. Sarutobi was seated at his seat, his head down, deeply drawn into his paperwork. Naruto grinned the biggest grin he had ever grinned in ages and ran towards the old man. He just wanted to embrace him into a huge hug. Old man Hoka. Naruto stopped mid-sentence, and the expression on his face disappeared as fast as it came when the old man looked up at him. That's not the old man. Well, not how he remembered him to be before. Chapter 3. Sarutobi looked at the boy in front of him, and then up at Minato, and then back at Naruto again. He leaned back on his chair, a smirk constantly making its way across his face. This ought to be interesting. Minato has a lot of explaining to do. Sarutobi signaled for the present and B guard to leave and they complied, a puzzled look on their faces, looking at Minato and the young blonde. Naruto stared at the Hokage before stepping back, hiding behind Minato. That wasn't the old man. The old man was, well, old, not young. Maybe he was using a special jutsu? Naruto thought. That could be possible. After all, the old man knew a lot of jutsus. Who is this? Sarutobi questioned, raising his eyebrow. He smiled at Naruto, making the kid dug behind the older blonde again. Minato smiled and crouched down, ruffling Naruto's hair. Hey kid, why don't you go wait outside? I'll tell you when to come in, K? Minato said, and Naruto with hesitation nodded his head slowly. He didn't want to go outside by himself, but he guessed he had no choice. God knows what could happen. Naruto saddened and Minato saw it. Don't worry Naruto, the ANBU would be there with you, Minato reassured. Inside Naruto grimaced. He didn't quite like the ANBU much. They weren't nice people, at least not to him anyways. He admired them but sadly, they were just like the rest. Naruto took one more look at the Hokage before walking out, keeping his head low and avoiding eye contact with the ANBU guard. He went and sat quietly on one of the bunch, and just kept his head low. Sorry about that, Minato pulled a nearby chair and sat down, a smirk engraved on his own face. So how is the paperwork going? Sarutobi smirked, and rubbed his temples. It was just typically of the blonde to tease him about this accursed paperwork. He knew how much he hated it. Damn it Minato, why are you making me suffer? Sarutobi demanded, slamming his fist on the desk rather playfully, but serious at the same time. Minato leaned back on his chair and shrugged innocently. I told you, I'm too young for this kind of stuff, Minato replied. This job required a lot of time spent sitting down, and signing your name, and getting bored beyond belief. Minato didn't think he was ready for that yet. Besides, he has a life to live after all, and he's not the type of person who would like to be stuck in an office all day long. It just wasn't his kind of thing. Sarutobi snorted and glared at Minato, who just grinned sheepishly at him. What, and you think I'm not too old for this? Sarutobi questioned, amused. Minato eyed him for a while before slowly shaking his head and smirking. Nope, sorry but I don't see any gray hairs just yet. At that, the former Hokage couldn't help but laugh. Minato's sense of humor never failed to amuse him, but that was still sly of him, making him doing all this paperwork when he could be enjoying a nice holiday somewhere by now. He could be enjoying a very nice hot spring bath to loosen his sore muscles and he maybe even have a few pretty women to keep him company. Even if Minato was probably just saying that as an excuse, he was still young. This was no way for him to spend his life. Goddamn, where was his brain when he agreed to this thing? You'll have to take back your position someday. Minato sighed and nodded his head. Yeah, I know. Sarutobi laughed and leaned back on his chair again, looking towards the door and then back at Minato, a small smirk spreading across his face. Minato, you didn't tell me you had a son. Where have you been hiding him for all these years? Sarutobi asked curiously, raising his eyebrow at the young sensei in front of him. He knew that the kid couldn't possibly be Minato's, but either way, he was still curious. He hadn't seen the blonde-haired boy in the village before, and it's not every day you get to see a mini Minato. The resemblance between those two was enough to put the idea of them being father and son into anybody's head, or that fact that they are related somehow. But the boy was not ordinary, that he had noticed. Sarutobi sensed a weird presence within the child, one he didn't like at all. What it was that rubbed him the wrong way, he could not fathom. His chakra was like nothing he had felt before. He wondered if Minato had sensed it too. Minato blinked, surprised and caught off guard. Oh, you mean Naruto? He questioned, having assumed that Sarutobi was talking about the child. Nah, he doesn't belong to me, sadly, Minato whispered. He bumped into me when I was on my way to my apartment, and for some reason he had seemed scared. Minato continued thoughtfully and Sarutobi nodded, signaling him to go on. He told me he had no parents and his clothes were torn, so I took him to the orphanage, since I couldn't take him to my apartment because that's not allowed. Minato ran a hand through his naturally spiked blonde hair. Anyways, I got the kid some clothes to change into, but he didn't want to, and he refused to eat anything I offered him even though he looked like he was starving. Minato sighed and looked at Sarutobi, who was listening, looking quite interested. I don't know, but I think I was giving him the wrong things anyways. How am I supposed to know? Minato sighed again in defeat and Sarutobi chuckled lightly. I see, Sarutobi confirmed. So the young child had no parents. That still didn't answer his suspicions. Minato ran his hand through his hair again and stretched his arms, feeling his tense muscles loosening. There's something strange about Naruto though, Minato added. He still remembered that fearsome chakra that he felt swirling around the child. It was very hard to pick up and only a very skilled ninja could sense it. Whatever it was troubling him. Ah, so I see you've sensed it too. Sarutobi leaned forward slightly in his chair. Minato scratched the back of his head. Yeah, but I'm still not sure what it is, Minato admitted and shifted uncomfortably in his chair. It was obvious he didn't like sitting down for a long time, even though he has only been there for about 20 minutes or so. The Hokage nodded in agreement. He was baffled by the strange chakra too. We will have to find that out later. But in the meantime we need to keep an eye on him, Sarutobi suggested and watched as Minato stood up from his chair, stretching. He wondered how long Minato would last if he did finally decide to take back his rightful position as Hokage. How he would pity the young man. Well, I should bring him in then. Minato turned his head towards the door. Minato walked over to the door and grabbed the handle. He then stopped and turns his head around, grinning. One more thing. A sly smirk appeared on his handsome features. If you let Naruto stay with me, then I'll take back my position as Hokage. But only after I take care of a few things first, Minato offered, nodding his head at the pile of paperwork that was resting in front of Sarutobi, waiting for him. He found it very good blackmailing material. Sarutobi rubbed his chin thoughtfully and considered Minato's offer. It was a good one, and he had nothing to lose. He narrowed his eyes and eyed Minato suspiciously. Why was he so interested in this child that he would even offer away his freedom? Sarutobi shrugged. It meant he was going to be free of those accursed paperwork at last, so what was he worrying about? I will see to that later, but first we need to find out more information. He might belong to a different village and therefore you can't keep him, so he will be staying at the orphanage until further notice, Sarutobi said, and Minato smiled approvingly at him before opening the door. It was very selfish of him, but he hoped that Naruto didn't belong to any village. Naruto, after almost half an hour of sitting down quietly with his head low, looked up slowly. There was an ANBU guard standing next to him. Naruto fearfully dared himself to look at him. The ANBU had a mask on and Naruto couldn't see his expression. The guy stood firmly, his head held high. Naruto concentrated on his masked face for a while, wondering if he could see with that thing on. Naruto didn't know why they even wore masks. It annoyed him because then he couldn't tell what they were thinking about him, whether they were glaring at him or not. The ANBU-chans that usually brought him food wore masks too. He couldn't tell their expressions too, but their fast departure was enough for him. "Hey, Naruto!" came a deep, clear voice. Naruto jumped and turned his head. Minato stood at the doorway and was waving Naruto over. Naruto slowly stood up and began walking towards him. He wondered what had took him so long. He was still cautious of Minato, but the man hadn't tried to do anything yet, so he thought he was okay. Minato smiled at Naruto as soon as he came, and he led him back into the Hokage's office. Sarutobi gestured for Naruto to sit down and he complied. The third Hokage smiled, making Naruto blush shyly. "So what's your name, son?" he asked. Naruto blinked at the question and looked up to meet the Hokage's gaze before turning away. Didn't he already know his name? Naruto was sure he did, but he answered anyways. "I am Naruto." After the meeting with the Hokage, Minato took Naruto back to the orphanage. Somehow the Hokage had managed to get the child to change his clothes and also convinced him to at least eat something. Minato was bewildered and wanted to know the old man's secret. This whole kid business thing he had yet to learn about. The journey was awfully quiet, and none of them said a word. When they had arrived at the orphanage, Naruto clung to Minato's cloak and had refused to let go. It was obvious the child didn't want to be left alone. The older blonde reassured him that he would be back in the morning and that the lady here at the orphanage was really nice, so he should be okay. Naruto let go of Minato, pouting and blushing shyly. "Well, Naruto, guess I'll see you tomorrow in the morning." Minato reached out and ruffled Naruto's blonde hair. He gave him a smile before leaving. Naruto smiled sadly and he looked out the window. He was alone again. Chapter 4. I can't believe he's late. Are you talking about Kakashi? Rin questioned as she sighed and looked over to the horizon. The sun was just beginning to rise up. Obito crossed his arms across his chest and sat down on a nearby rock, a frown engraved on his face. "I'm not talking about that bastard, he can be late for all I care," Obito snorted. "I'm talking about our new sensei. He should have been here half an hour ago," he exclaimed, pouting. Rin shook her head at his childish act and then began to wonder. Where was their sensei anyways? He wasn't making a very good impression. This was their first lesson, and he was late. Rin grimaced at the thought of having another Obito around. Where was Kakashi anyways? He was never one to be late, and the fact that he wasn't here right now surprised her. The whole reason she had come early, like their sensei had said, was so she could have some time alone with Kakashi. Of course she wasn't expecting Obito to be the one to show up early. The whole thing was just annoying her, and now she wished she hadn't come. Meh, when is he going to get here? "I'm hungry." Obito's stomach let out a growl and he groaned. It was just so typical of their sensei, telling them to not eat breakfast. God knows, the guy could be having his breakfast now while they were out here, suffering from the dreadful weather that the morning had to offer. "Be patient, Obito. I'm sure Minato-sensei has a very good reason for his lateness, unlike you," Rin stated, somewhat annoyed. She was hungry too and didn't have any breakfast this morning, and his jabbering wasn't helping. She wondered why their sensei had told them not to eat anything. How on earth were they going to train if they didn't have the energy? Why did he make us meet here so early anyways? A small yawn escaped Obito's lips, and he rubbed at his eyes. The young genin boy hadn't gotten any proper sleep last night, all because he was hyper and so excited about training. "How the hell am I supposed to know?" Rin shot back. Obito was starting to get on her nerves. First he was going on about how physic he was about the training, and now he was complaining about being hungry. Why the hell was he here so early anyways? She thought of asking. It was bad enough having to put up with him at the academy, and now he was in her team. Cammy must really hate her. She fiddled with the grass and sighed. "Let's give him a few more minutes." The two young genins sighed when they suddenly heard some noise. They swift around and took out their kunais, ready to attack if the person turned out to be an intruder or an enemy of some sort. They wished it was either at the moment. They were too tired and were a bit worn out from the lack of sleep. To their relief they lowered their guards and looked at the person in front of them with disapproving eyes. "You're late," Obito stated. "Oh, I'm sorry about that." Minato looked as guilty as ever and he shot them a grin. He scanned the area and then looked at them, raising his eyebrow in question. "Where's Kakashi?" Obito shrugged. "Ma, who cares about him? Let's just start training already. If he's late, that's his problem." Minato blinked. He hadn't quite expected Kakashi to be the late one. In fact, he thought it would have been the Uchiha. When he read their files, not once had Kakashi been reported late. So sensei, why were you late? Obito dared to ask. Rin elbowed him and he turned and glared at her. What? I have the right to know, he exclaimed, and she just rolled her eyes at him. You could expect such things from Obito. Minato scratched his head nervously and looked uneasy. Well, you see, Minato began, trying to find a good enough excuse. What could possibly be a good excuse? He was about an hour late. Maybe he should just tell them the truth and hope for the best. After all, it wasn't his fault. I kind of slept in, Minato admitted, looking guiltier than ever. Obito and Rin exchanged glances and then frowned. That was the best he could come up with. Obito leaned in and whispered to Rin. Well, his excuse was even lamer than my ones, and you complain all the time. Minato frowned. Hey, I had my reasons, he said defensively, looking sheepish. He cleared his throat. Well, I guess we can't start training until Kakashi gets here. There was the sound of rustling leaves and everyone turned their heads in the direction of the noise. Kakashi emerged out and scanned his teammates and his sensei, looking as serious as ever. Minato eyed him curiously and he just walked over to the rest of the team. Why were you late, huh? Obito demanded, glaring at Kakashi. I wasn't late, you idiot, Kakashi stated and turned his head to look at Minato disapprovingly. You could tell from his stare that he wasn't really fond of late people. I just didn't want to listen to your constant whining and complaints, so I went to train until Minato-sensei got here. Minato shrunk under Kakashi's intense glare, and he let out a small inward laugh, almost sounding like a giggle of nervousness. Rin glared at Kakashi. Well, you could have saved me the headache and brought me along, she accused. Kakashi just shrugged and Obito pouted. Hey, I wasn't complaining that much, he defended. Yeah, sure. Minato cleared his throat again and smiled. Well, since Kakashi is here, I guess I can give you guys your first test then, he said, and received blank and worried expressions in response. Well, mostly from Obito anyways. What test? Obito questioned, sounding somewhat worried. He was never really good at tests, and he hated them. Minato chuckled, detecting the worriedness in the young Uchiha's voice. He pulled out 2 tangling bells out of his pocket and held them in front of him. It's called the bell test. Minato waved the bells in front of him, making them ring in the passing wind. The test is easy, really. All you have to do is get a bell from me before sundown and you pass, Minato explained. What? It's going to take us that long? But I'm hungry, why didn't you let us eat breakfast? Obito whined and Kakashi looked at him sideways. There he goes again. Well, you'll find that out after the test, Minato replied. The raven-haired boy pouted and crossed his arms across his chest. Rin raised her hand, a look of confusing on her face. Yes, Rin? Minato confirmed. Sensei, I was just wondering, how come you only have 2 bells when there are 3 of us in total? Rin asked, curiosity getting the best of her. Kakashi and Obito were curious too, so they listened intensely. The young sensei grinned maliciously. This was probably the best part, and he wanted to see the look on their faces. It would be priceless. That's the whole point, Minato began, watching their expressions. Only 2 will pass this test. As for the one that fails, well, he or she will be sent back to the academy. Minato explained and watched as their expressions changed. What? Their jaws dropped, and even Kakashi managed to look a bit shocked and horrified. Going back to the academy? Hell no, Minato smiled and nodded. So now you all know how important this test is, he stated, and they all nodded, looking serious. Okay then, Minato placed the bells on his waist belt where they can easily be accessible. Begin. Within a swift moment, they were all gone into hiding, leaving Minato alone in the training field. He smirked, looking impressed. Naruto looked out the window again and sighed sadly. That blonde-haired man had said that he would come and visit him in the morning, but now there was no sign of him. Naruto was disappointed and he fiddled with the small toy in his hand. It was a small teddy bear. The nice woman at the orphanage had given it to him. At first the young blonde had refused it, but when the woman left it in his room, he had eyed it for a while and soon found himself poking it. Naruto didn't know why everyone was suddenly acting kind towards him, and he was confused at their sudden change of behavior. It wasn't his birthday anyways, and even if it was, their behaviors and actions were still the same, or even worse. No one was calling him a monster anymore or giving him hateful glares. He knew he still has that thing inside of him, so why was everyone so different? Didn't they care anymore? The door creaked slowly and Naruto turned his head, wondering who it was. The door opened and a woman with long black hair poked her head in. Naruto stared cautiously at first, but when he saw who it was, he let a small smile creep onto his cute baby face. It was that nice lady again. Hey Naruto-kun, she greeted with a smile. The woman had a nice smile and she went by the name of Mikoto Uchiha. She runs the orphanage and so far, Naruto seems to like her. Hi, Naruto greeted back with his tiny voice. He wasn't used to talking to people. It didn't bother him much though, since there weren't that many people to talk to but the old man and sometimes Iruka-sensei. Mikoto walked up to him and kneeled down to his level, smoothing back his spiky hair and frowning. Why aren't you playing outside with the other kids, Naruto-kun? Mikoto looked concerned. Naruto lowered his head. I'm waiting for Yandai Yan Minato-sama, Naruto replied. Mikoto Uchiha raised her eyebrows. You mean Yandame-sama? She asked, and Naruto nodded, unable to pronounce that name. Naruto didn't want to go outside for 2 reasons. He didn't want the other kids to tease him and call him names, nor have their parents come and drag them away from him like he was some contagious disease. And second, he hated it when he was always left alone at the end of the day. He would watch the other kids get hugged by their parents and taken home, hand in hand, while he is left alone with nobody. Mikoto placed a hand on his shoulder and smiled at Naruto. Don't worry, Naruto-kun, I'm sure he'll come, she assured. At first she wanted to believe that Naruto was Minato's son or his relative, but the fact that the kid is an orphanage changed everything. She still had her suspicions though. Naruto looked up at her with his innocent huge baby blue eyes and smiled. Mikoto felt a warm feeling rush through her. He was so cute. I'll tell you what, how about you go play with the other kids until he comes? How does that sound? She asked. Naruto's smile disappeared and he bluntly shook his head. Come on Naruto-kun, don't be shy, it'll be fun, she persuaded. Naruto thought for a moment, fiddling with his teddy bear again. I'll come with you if you want, she added. Naruto eyed her suspiciously and raised his eyebrow. Really? Really? She replied. Naruto nodded slowly. For the first time he is not going to be left alone. This nice lady might not be related to him, but still, she was going to walk back home with him, and that was something he could not decline. Okay then, let's go. Minato walked back to his apartment and deactivated his security seal before entering. He was met with the hollow emptiness of his huge apartment, and he sighed, groaning. He was so tired and could really use a nice hot bath to loosen his very tense muscles. He hadn't gotten any sleep last night thanks to the so-called council meeting. It was depressing to tell the truth, and Minato hated it. His latest mission also proved to be troubling and has now left him feeling weird emotions. Kushina Uzumaki. That woman could be so troublesome sometimes. Minato activated the security seal again and then went to his bedroom. The test that he gave his students proved to be challenging too. Minato was really impressed with their fighting skills and their teamwork. He had to keep his guard at all times, and it wasn't surprising when Kakashi was the first to get a bell from him. Rin was good too, but she wasn't good enough. Obito was another story. Flashback. Minato-sensei, this is not fair. You never said anything about being tied to a pole. Obito complained as he struggled against the ropes, his stomach giving out a growl. Kakashi chuckled as he pulled down his mask slightly and began eating his reward. He looked at Obito and smirked. Maybe it was because Minato-sensei hadn't quite expected you to turn out as such a big loser, Kakashi stated, and Rin giggled, making Obito turn bright red. Shut up, bastard, he growled. Hey, language, Minato warned, and Kakashi snickered. End flashback. Minato sighed and ran a hand through his hair. He went into the bathroom and turned on the water before coming back to his room to undress himself. He went back into the bathroom and began having a shower. After his much-needed shower for his poor muscles, Minato sat at the edge of his bed and took out the scroll with the contract written in it. He read a little of it and then placed it aside, deciding that it'll be best to finish it tomorrow. He was too tired at the moment. Going back in the bathroom to clean his teeth before bed, Minato froze at his reflection, remembering something. Oh shit. The blonde-haired man raced back to his room and quickly got dressed, and in a flash of yellow, he was gone. I'm sorry, Yandame-sama, but Naruto-kun has just gone to bed minutes ago. Mikoto bowed at Minato and he cursed under his breath. How could he have forgotten? He had said that he would see him in the morning and he hadn't showed up. Minato hoped that Naruto could forgive him. It was very unusual of him to forget so easily, but he guessed that the stress was now getting to him. Well, can I still see him? Minato asked, hoping that the kid was still somewhat awake. Of course you may, the Uchiha politely answered and led Minato to Naruto's room before leaving the two alone. Minato smiled down at the sleeping Naruto. He looked so cute with his small and round peaceful face. Minato kneeled down and reached out his hand and brushed away the hair from Naruto's face, which seemed to be sticking in all directions, and then froze. There was that weird presence again. It was that chakra that bothered him so much. Minato shook his head and pulled the blanket over Naruto before standing up and staring down at his face for a while. I'll be back tomorrow, kid, Minato said and went outside, closing the door gently after him. Naruto, after he was sure that Minato had gone, opened one eye. Chapter 5. The next morning, Minato went down to the orphanage to go and visit Naruto. He felt really bad about forgetting the little kid and thought he should own it up to him somehow. He was going to take the little blonde out for a special treat of his own. After all, it's the least he could do to show he was sorry. Minato also made this as an excuse to not attend the council meeting. They could do without him, he was sure. When Minato reached the building, he stopped and smiled. Upstairs, looking down from the window, stood Naruto with his teddy bear close to his chest. He was staring at a few kids playing around in the playground, and Minato frowned, wondering why he wasn't coming down to join them. Minato-kun! Minato-kun! Minato raised his eyebrows and turned around, upon hearing his name. Two young girls raced over to him, and he smiled at them. They were twins from the look of it, and probably the same age as Naruto. Minato blinked. How old was Naruto anyways? He had forgotten to ask. Good morning, The two greeted, grinning sheepishly at the blonde. Good morning, Minato greeted back, smiling in return. Minato was hoping that it was going to be a good morning anyways. He hoped Naruto was not mad at him. It truly wasn't his fault. The poor guy was exhausted after what he had been through that day. The two girls fiddled with their fingers, a tint of pink showing on their cheeks, and Minato eyed them curiously. They were nervous and he could tell. Can you play with us? Please? The two asked heartedly, looking up at Minato with cute puppy eyes. Minato chuckled and then kneeled down to their levels. He didn't want to disappoint them, but there was something more important he had to do at the moment. I'm sorry girls, but I'm kind of busy right now. Maybe next time, he said and watched as their expressions turned from excitement to disappointment. They looked at the ground and nodded sadly, making Minato feel guilty. Oh okay. Minato ruffled their hairs, a habit he didn't know he had. The girls smiled at him and a woman approached them. Please do excuse my daughters, Yandeme-sama. My apologies for them interrupting your day. The woman bowed and Minato shook his head slightly. No. It's okay, really. Minato grinned and the woman smiled back at him. She was grateful for his understanding and took her daughters by the hand. We shall get going now. Have a good day, the woman said, and Minato nodded. As they left, the two twins turned and waved at him. Minato waved back and then turned around and looked up at the window. Naruto was gone. Maybe he had seen Minato and left? Minato sighed and ran his hand through his hair, so he guessed Naruto was still mad at him. Minato went inside and to the front counter. I'm here for Naruto, he said, and the woman at the front nodded. Right this way, Yandeme-sama. The raven-haired young woman, who also went by the name of Akita Uchiha, led him to Naruto's room. She opened the door and Minato nodded his thanks. Naruto sat on his bed, tangling his feet in the air as he played with his teddy bear. He barely lifted an eyebrow to look at Minato. Hey kid, Minato gently closed the door behind and walked up to Naruto. Liar, Naruto solemnly responded as a way of greeting, keeping his head low and refused to look at him. Minato blinked and frowned, trying to figure out what on earth the kid was talking about, and then it suddenly dawned on him. I'm sorry, Naruto. I didn't mean to. Minato had a sorry look on his face, and he went to sit down next to Naruto. You lied. You said you'd come, but you lied. Naruto looked up at Minato, his eyes filling up with tears. Minato felt sad, seeing the tears. What sort of man was he, making a small kid cry? He never felt so guilty in his entire life. Hey, come on now. I didn't lie, Minato reasoned and reached out his hand, wiping the tears away from Naruto's eyes. The young boy looked up at him, his huge innocent eyes staring at him confusingly. You didn't? He asked, fighting back his sob. Minato shook his head. No. He wasn't just about to tell the kid that he had forgotten about him. He was not an idiot. Besides, he hadn't really forgotten about him. Minato smiled and looked at Naruto. Come on, Naruto, do you want to go out for fresh air? Minato questioned, and Naruto nodded slowly and wiped the tears away with the back of his hand. He felt embarrassed at how easily he came to tears. He then smiled. It should be fun. He had quite enjoyed going outside yesterday when he went with that nice lady. None of the kids were being mean to him like they usually were, and he even got to play with some of them. He never had so much fun in his life before, and he wanted to do it again. Just as long as Minato goes with him, Naruto didn't mind at all. He doesn't trust everyone that much yet, so he didn't think he was ready to go alone. Minato stood up and went to open the door. Come on, let's go. Naruto got to his feet and went up to him, blushing slightly. Minato went to the front counter before they left, assuring the young Uchiha that he had full responsibility for Naruto, and would bring him back at the appropriate time. Have fun, Naruto-kun. Akita waved as the two blonde exited the building. Minato and Naruto walked quietly alongside each other, Minato stopping now and then to greet someone or inform them of something. Some of the villagers were staring at the two, a questioning look in their eyes. It was the first time for them to see the two walk together, and the similarities between the two were beyond belief. Most of them were sure on their lives that just a few days ago, Minato was single and had no child of any kind. So where on earth did this kid come from? The woman must consider herself very lucky. Having such a beautiful young boy and a handsome husband, Minato could hear the civilian women whispering among themselves. Minato chuckled lightly under his breath. He never thought that they thought of him as handsome before, but considering his looks, he couldn't argue with them. Naruto made sure to keep close to Minato. He wasn't used to being out in the public much, and he knew too well why. Although today, things were different. Naruto only wished that it could be like this all the time. Where are we going? The young boy asked curiously, tugging on Minato's sleeve and looking up at him. The young Jounin-sensei looked down at him and smiled. We are going to a place I like to call heaven, Minato replied and then chuckled, seeing the questioning look the child was giving him. We're just heading to the Ichiraku ramen place for a treat. Minato smiled, licking his lips, already tasting the delicious ramen that awaits him. You don't mind, do you, Naruto-kun? Minato asked a little worried. If Naruto didn't like ramen, then that would mean his plans would be ruined and then he'd have to find another way to say he was sorry. Much to his relief, Minato raised his eyebrow in amusement as Naruto's eyes lit up, and for a moment, he thought the kid was going to jump up for joy. Ramen! Naruto exclaimed excitedly, grinning up at Minato. It's been a long time since he ate proper ramen, and the ones that they used to bring up at his apartment didn't taste, well. They were cold and he usually had to cook them, and ended up burning himself at various times. So I see you like ramen too. Minato felt like facepalming himself. How could he have been so stupid all this time, wondering what the kid liked to eat? Of course the kid loved ramen, who didn't? It was the food of a lifetime, well to him anyways. No one could resist the sheer awesomeness of ramen. Come on then. Minato took Naruto by the hand and then led the child into the Ichiraku ramen place. Ah, Minato, come back for more, I see? The bar owner, Tsuchi, smiled upon seeing his best customer. Minato chuckled and put on an innocent look. I can't help myself. It's your fault for making them so damn tasty, he accused, and Tsuchi just laughed. Do forgive me. He stopped and frowned, looking behind the older blonde. My Minato, I didn't know you had a son. Minato smiled and looked behind him, smiling at Naruto and asking the kid to take a seat. Oh, this is Naruto. He isn't my son, Minato replied, not knowing how wrong he was. He helped Naruto onto a bar stool, seeing the difficulties the child was going through thanks to his height. Tsuchi took some time to look back and forth at the two blondes and then raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? I'm not convinced. Minato chuckled again and waved his hands lazily. Meh, I'm sure, he said, doubting his words deeply. Maybe he ought to get a blood test just to be extra sure? Well, what would you two like today? Naruto gets a free meal. The man smirked when he saw the childish look on Minato's face. Ah, come on, I'm sure a man like you have some cash on them. He smiled and gave them the menu sheet. Well kid, order up, Minato suggested, and Naruto just stared at the menu in front of him. The words danced right in front of his eyes, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't make up a single word. Naruto thought for a moment, and then decided to order his favorite. Miso ramen. He couldn't read, but at least he knew what it was called. I'll get miso ramen, please. The two yelled at the same time, and then paused. Minato looked over at Naruto. Wow kid, I didn't know you liked miso ramen too, the blonde said incredulously, sounding surprised. Naruto grinned. It's my favorite. The cheerful young boy answered, and Minato raised his eyebrow, looking interested. It was his favorite too. Just how much more did they have in common, he thought as Tsuchi came back with their orders, having heard them loud and clear. Well, here you go. Tsuchi placed the 2 bowls of steaming miso ramen in front of the two and smiled. Enjoy. Naruto and Minato stared down hungrily at the food, drooling just by looking at it. Naruto took his chopsticks and started gulping down his ramen like there was no tomorrow, Minato soon following and doing the same. Tsuchi stepped back and crossed his arms across his chest, wearing a bemused expression on his face as he observed the two blondes. The way they were gulping down their bowls of ramen, there was no doubt in the bar owner's mind that they were definitely related. He was sure on his life. As soon as Naruto had finished eating, he pushed aside the empty bowl that a few minutes ago contained his favorite ramen and then grinned. Minato had just finished his second bowl and then let out a sigh, satisfied with himself. Ah, ramen, I can never get sick of it, Minato stated, patting his full stomach proudly and grinning back at Naruto. He could tell that Naruto agreed with him on that. Well Naruto, that's it for the day. Time for me to take you back, it's getting late. Minato stood up and helped Naruto down from his stool. Tsuchi came to collect the bowls and his money, bowing respectfully at Minato. I guess I'll be seeing you again soon, Minato. Tsuchi smiled. And you too, Naruto-kun. Naruto bowed slowly and Minato nodded his thanks. Thanks for the ramen, Naruto said as he followed the older blonde out of the bar. It wasn't every day that Naruto got a free meal, so he was really grateful. The sky had turned a shade of red and orange as the two walked back to the orphanage. The sun was setting and it looked beautiful in the distance. If it weren't for the accursed contracts waiting for him back at his apartment, Minato would have took Naruto to go and watch the sunset with him. There was a nice place up in the mountains where he usually sat watched. It was peaceful and it was also a good location to watch the sunset. Maybe he ought to take Naruto there one day, which is if the Hokage agrees to let Naruto stay with him. Minato was getting quite lonely in his apartment, and having Naruto around shouldn't be so bad. He didn't think he was ready to take on the responsibility of a child yet, but still, how much trouble can one kid cause? He was sure he could handle it. Chapter 6. Minato was enjoying a lovely afternoon up in the mountain, gazing down at the village beneath him. He sighed and wondered how he could tell Sarutobi about this. He couldn't take up this responsibility just yet. There were just too many things in his hands right now. It wasn't that he didn't think that he could handle it. He could, but it was just that he didn't think he was ready yet. The Sandaime would understand, wouldn't he? He would just have to put up with the paperwork for a little while more. Being Hokage was a very important job and very tempting, but just not too tempting enough for Minato. Oh, it would be nice to have control over the village, but that was not what he wanted now. He wanted a family. Strangely, he didn't know where that idea had come from, but that's what he wanted right now. He was still young and he knew that, but as a shinobi, you never know when your life could be ended. He was the last of his clan sadly, and he didn't want the Namikaze's blood to be wiped out of existence. Heck no, why does life have to be full of so many decisions? The young blonde asked himself quietly as he laid back and rested his hands behind his head, letting out a sigh. He smiled, looking up at the blue sky, watching the clouds dance by. It was so peaceful up here, and he usually came here whenever he got the chance, which was not a lot to say. Today was his day off away from missions and meetings, and he wanted to enjoy every bit of it. The blonde closed his eyes slowly as the wind blew in his face, ruffling his hair. The yellow-clad shinobi abruptly stood up and got into a defensive stance as he heard some noise and rustling coming from the bush. At first he couldn't detect the chakra signal, but when he did, he dropped his guard. "Naruto, what are you doing here?" the young jounin questioned, sounding concerned. Naruto emerged, fighting his way out of the thick branches, receiving a few bruises as he stood there, looking innocent. "Mikoto-chan said I could come out and play," Naruto replied as he picked out a few branches out of his hair, which appeared to be a tangle of mess, and he grinned up at Minato. "Naruto, you know I told you never to come up here alone," Minato said, and reached out his hand to brush away the dirt from Naruto's cheeks, but then stopped and frowned, his eyes darting down to Naruto's knees. "You're hurt," he exclaimed, and Naruto looked up and raised his eyebrow, then looked at his knee. There was blood, but no wound in sight. "I'm sorry," Naruto began and lowered his head. Minato looked back at his face and smiled. "Don't worry, it's fine. Besides, your wound is not that bad." Minato examined Naruto's knee for a while and then sat back down, gesturing for the kid to sit next to him. Where the wound had gone was beyond his belief. Naruto didn't know any jutsus, and he was pretty sure that people didn't bleed for no reason, but he didn't want to get Naruto worried, so he kept quiet but made a mental note in his head. How did Naruto get all the way up here anyways? It was a long way up, and Minato didn't think Naruto would have the guts to climb here, but he guessed he was wrong. "Why don't you visit me that much anymore?" Naruto asked and looked at Minato, who just grinned and ruffled his hair. "Sorry, Naruto, I've just been too busy," the older blonde replied and sighed. He tried all he could to go visit Naruto whenever he had any time on his hand, but he has been rather busy this time around. What with Kushina to deal with and his genin team, he also tries to make time for Naruto too. "But you promised you'd take me to Ichiroku's for ramen today." Naruto whined and began picking at the grass beneath him. "Sure, kid, I never go back on my promises. Anyways, I was just about to come get you and take you home." Minato smiled and stood up, and Naruto soon followed and looked up at him, his expression filled with confusion. "Home?" Naruto raised his eyebrow in question. "Yeah, with me," Minato replied and took Naruto's hand, carefully leafing from tree to tree as they headed back for the village. Some research was done on the kid, and it turned out that he didn't belong to any village. It was kind of strange though, there was no background history on the child, and no one claimed to have a missing son that fitted the description of Naruto. The third was uneasy about it at first, but then Minato talked him out of it, and at the end, he agreed to let Naruto stay with him. Minato was very flattered and promised to take full responsibility for Naruto. For some reason he felt attached to the kid, and whenever he saw Naruto, he couldn't help but smile. He felt a very strong connection between them, even though they've known each other now for only about 3 months. "Does this mean I'm going to be living with you?" Naruto asked, the idea making him grin maliciously. He never thought he would ever get adopted before. Back in the orphanage when he was about 2 to 3 years old, he always used to sit down by himself and watch the other kids get taken home by new parents. They had seemed so happy, and Naruto would also feel their happiness until the end of the day. He would watch the last of the kids walk away hand in hand with their new parents, and then the doors would be closed, and his smile would turn upside down. It was almost the same each year. No one wanted to adopt him. "Yeah, but first we have to go say goodbye to Mikoto-chan," Minato replied as they headed for the orphanage. "Does that mean you're gonna be my daddy now?" Naruto didn't know much about adoption, but he remembered one of the orphanage lady tell one of the kids that once they are adopted, those people who adopted them will be their new parents. Naruto liked the idea. He was finally going to have a family. "I guess," Minato scratched the back of his head sheepishly and grinned. Was he ready to be a dad? It didn't matter. He would still have to take care of Naruto anyways. "Who is going to be my mommy then?" Naruto asked curiously, making Minato stop in his track. Naruto was sure that he was supposed to have 2 parents, a mom and a dad. "Well, you see," Minato began awkwardly and then froze, his heart missing several beats, as he saw a woman with long reddish hair walking towards them, a smile on her face. "Hello, Minato," she greeted as she reached them. Naruto frowned and looked up at Minato to see his face turning slightly red, and he looked back at the woman in front of them. "Hiyo, Kushina," Minato barely managed to say as he offered back her smile. Kushina grinned, her cheeks turning a lighter shade of pink, and she looked at his side, her eyes widening a fraction. "Hey, who's the mini Minato?" She gazed down at Naruto, smiling. She had heard about him from Minato, but this was the first time for her to actually meet him. Could this be the little kid everyone was saying was Minato's child? If it was, then she couldn't argue with that. All the evidence was right in front of her. The older blonde chuckled and blushed slightly. "Oh, this is Naruto." "Naruto, this is Kushina," he introduced. "Hey, Kushina-chan." Naruto smiled and Kushina kneeled down next to him. "Hello, Naruto-kun." Kushina gently ruffled his hair and then froze as their eyes locked. Mindscape. Kushina blinked as she looked around, getting familiar with the place. She frowned and began walking as she could hear voices. What was she doing here? She's not supposed to be here. Something must be very wrong. Kushina stopped and stared ahead of her, her eyes widening slightly as she saw two figures. A small child stood outside a large cage, and inside the cage was a very furious, confused and murderous-looking Kyuubi. Kushina gasped. Wait, what was Naruto doing there? Chapter 7. The truth shall make you faint. I demand to know what's going on. The Kyuubi growled, making Naruto flinch and step back in fear. The wrench beast was furious and mad beyond belief. Who was this little brat, and how did he get here? The Ninetales didn't remember giving anyone permission to visit him in his cage. In fact, he didn't remember ever wanting to be put in a cage in the first place. Oh, those accursed shinobis and their so-called jutsus. How he would love to rip their souls into pieces once he gets out of that stupid cage that held him as a prisoner. The Kyuubi-eyed Naruto, looking at the kid in disgust. Humans, how he despised them. Naruto, what are you doing here? A voice questioned and Naruto jumped, turning around. Kushina emerged out of the shadows and walked towards the little blonde as she glanced at the Kyuubi who was now eyeing the two with a killer instinct. Kushina-chan? What's going on? Naruto asked, his voice so tiny and filled with fear and confusion. Kushina walked up to him and pulled him into a hug as she looked up at the Ninetales demon. Kyuubi, what's going on? Why is Naruto here? Kushina asked with utter confusion. How was Naruto able to be here? Kushina was pretty sure she was the only one who had the Kyuubi sealed inside of her, and she was the only who could visit him. Not that she actually liked visiting him. There was something strange going on, but her mind just couldn't progress what it was. The Kyuubi snarled and then froze upon hearing the name Naruto. A memory flashed in his mind and he looked at the small blonde child more carefully, and then shook his head at what he knew could not be possible. How is that even possible? Kushina blinked, holding Naruto close to her as she raised her eyebrow. How is what possible? Naruto, what are you doing in this time period? How in the world did you manage to get here, you little brat? The Kyuubi snarled, his claws curled around the bars of the cage. Naruto didn't belong here. There was no way the kid knew any jutsus, let alone a time travel one. There had to be an explanation behind this. Either way, how was it possible that the Kyuubi could be sealed into two people at the same time? Naruto-kun, what is he talking about? Who are you and where did you come from? Kushina brought Naruto in front of her, examining him. Naruto lowered his head and was almost in tears. I don't know. Kushina suddenly let go of Naruto and clenched her head as images and memories started to flash in her head, clouding her mind, and Naruto stepped back, his eyes wide in shock. The red-haired Kuniochi was doubled over as images and memories were being poured into her head. There was a small child with blonde hair and blue eyes. Then there was a slightly older man with the same characteristics, and then her. The blonde man was holding the child in one arm and holding her hand with the other, as he smiled sadly, and a few doctors rushed in. Mommy? Kushina gasped and jerked her head up as her eyes met Naruto's, and the two stood there, staring at each other. Naruto's baby blue eyes were still wide open and he reached out his hand to her slowly, as if unsure of what he was doing. Hello? Earth to Kushina and Naruto. Are you two still alive? Hello? Anybody home? Kushina blinked and shook her head as she was once again brought to reality. Minato stood there, still holding Naruto's hand as he looked at the two, a concerned look on his face. The redhead just kept staring at Naruto as if in a trance, and Minato brought his hand in front of her face, waving it slightly. Hey Kushina, are you okay? You two have been staring at each other for about 2 to 3 minutes now, the older blonde said, and Kushina blinked as well as Naruto. Kushina stood up and looked at Minato and then at Naruto before suddenly fainting. Kushina! Naruto ducked behind Minato, scared. Was it something I said? Kushina groaned as she slowly opened her eyes and glanced around. Minato sat on a chair near her bed, smiling at her. Hey, you're awake? How you feeling? Minato asked, looking at her. Kushina sat up and smiled as a small blush made its way to her cheeks. I'm feeling better, thanks. She looked at him. Where is Naruto? I left him in the Hokage office with the Sandaime, Minato replied. Kushina nodded and then frowned. What happened? The yellow-clad shinobi scratched his head and grinned. Well, you and Naruto were staring at each other, and you sorta just passed out, Minato said as a way of explanation. Kushina nodded. I see. What happened anyways? Minato questioned, curiosity getting the best of him. It's kinda hard to explain, but there's something I must tell you about Naruto. Kushina looked Minato in the eye, her heart suddenly beating fast. He raised his eyebrow. What may that be? Kushina took a deep breath and then looked at him seriously. She didn't know how she was going to explain it, but she was going to try her best anyways. Naruto is your son. Minato sighed in relief, thinking it was going to be something bad, and then chuckled. Yeah, a lot of people say that. Even I'm starting to think that he is my son. Minato smiled at Kushina and then frowned when she shook her head, her face slightly turning red. No, I mean, he really is your son and mine too. Minato froze, restraining his jaws from dropping to the ground in pure shock as he went stiff. How is that even possible, he stammered. I mean, we didn't even. Minato's face turned a very interesting shade of red that would put all tomatoes to shame just thinking about it, and he looked almost about to faint. Kushina on the other hand wasn't doing a pretty good job herself, and she lowered her head, avoiding his eyes. It was logically impossible, wasn't it? It had to be. It wasn't that Minato didn't want to have a child with Kushina, oh no. It wasn't because of that at all. Minato stood up slowly, nice and steady so he wouldn't fall over, and Kushina dared herself to look at him. Where are you going? I'm going to get a DNA test, Minato said as he raced out of the hospital room, fearing that if he stayed there any longer, his heart would suddenly stop beating. Minato waited patiently in the guest room for the test result. His mind was racing, and he was thinking of all the possibilities. Was it really necessary to take the test? Did it really matter anyway? Whether Naruto was or was not his son, he would still love him anyway. Besides, Naruto was going to be living with him now and he adopted him, so that makes him his son, doesn't it? A few medical needs passed Minato to go and treat some patients, and he let out a frustrated sigh. How long does it take them to match some blood samples? The blonde beamed when he saw a young medical need headed his way. He stood up and waited for her eagerly, looking at the file in her hands. As she got closer, Minato felt his heartbeat begin to speed up. This was the moment of truth. He could handle this, couldn't he? Well, we finally got the results. The young medic stopped in front of Minato, a warm smile on her face. She took the file and handed it to him, and Minato accepted it, holding it with great care. Minato took a deep breath and looked down at the results. Maybe all the rumors were true. It was so obvious. Only one word made Minato's heart stop: matched. It was one simple word, and yet it made history. With that one simple word registered in his mind, Minato grinned maliciously before his eyes rolled back in their sockets, and he fainted. The young medic gasped quietly, and everyone stopped whatever they were doing and observed the scene. What they saw was something considered an opportunity that only came once. There were a few minutes of awkward silence before everyone went back to what they were doing, and a few medical needs rushed over and proceeded to wake up the blonde. Minato woke up a few minutes later and looked around. He was still in the hospital, and the same young medic Neen was observing him with a worried look on her face. Are you feeling okay? She questioned, and Minato nodded slowly, getting out of his hospital bed and standing up. He rubbed his aching head and then smiled, remembering the test result. So the rumors were true after all. Minato thanked the young medic, and just when he was about to leave, an ANBU appeared in front of him. The Hokage wishes to see you in his office immediately. It's urgent and it concerns Naruto. The ANBU spoke, and Minato's heart skipped a beat. Was Naruto hurt or something? What happened? Is Naruto okay? The older blonde asked worriedly, looking very concerned. The ANBU slightly nodded his head. Naruto is fine, he assured, and the young Junin sighed with relief and then raised his eyebrow in a questioning manner. If Naruto was okay, then what was so urgent about it? Minato turned his attention to the young medic. Thank you for your help. I better go now and see what the hassle is all about. Sure, and you're welcome. She bowed, and Minato smiled at her before taking the test result and disappearing along with the ANBU. When the two reappeared in the Hokage's office, Naruto was sleeping peacefully in a small laid-out bed in the corner of the room, and the Sandaime was deeply absorbed into something, a piece of paper in his hand. When he felt the presence of the two, he looked up, a concerned look on his face before thanking the ANBU and signaling for him to leave. The ANBU complied and disappeared again in a puff. So what's up? Minato inquired, helping himself to a nearby chair. The Sandaime walked over to him and handed him the piece of paper he was holding moments ago. Minato, with a raised eyebrow, took the piece of paper and monitored it before looking up at the third. It's a letter from the future, Sarutobi began to explain, and Minato leaned forward, looking fascinated. The future? This ought to be interesting. It is about Naruto. I think you should read it to get a better understanding, Sarutobi suggested, and then went and sat back in his seat. Minato frowned and then inspected the piece of paper before he began to read it. Yo, Minato-sensei, this little child here is Naruto. You might or might not know him already, depending on what time you got this message. He is your son, and Kushina's Naruto was born on the 10th of October, a very terrible day in the history of Konoha. I shouldn't tell you why though, just in case it changes anything, but I guess that's too late now. Minato stopped for a few seconds, looking up at the Hokage, and he signaled for him to read on. I cast a time travel jutsu on Naruto, and that is why he is here/there with you. There is something important you must know. Naruto has the QB sealed inside of him by you. At this point, the blonde stopped reading once again and his eyes widened in shock. Naruto was holding the QB inside of him? But wasn't that impossible? Kushina had the nine-tailed beast. And he sealed the demon in Naruto. What was he thinking? Minato turned his attention back to the message again. By the time Naruto gets there/here, he won't remember much, and that's probably what I want. The jutsu would last for as long as a year, so spend as much time as you can with him. P.S. I am so sorry for not fulfilling your last wish. I hope that you would forgive me one day, Kakashi Hatake. Once Minato finished reading the letter, he ran his fingers through his hair and sighed, looking over at the third Hokage. Where did you find this? The third examined Minato before answering. It was sealed on Naruto's back, hid behind the layer of his skin. I just spotted it earlier this afternoon. Sarutobi inhaled at his pipe and sighed too. Minato stood up and looked at the sleeping Naruto. Well, the letter explains almost everything, Minato whispered, and the third eyed him curiously with a raised eyebrow. Almost everything? Yeah, it explains why Naruto doesn't belong to any village and the reason he doesn't have any background history. It also explains the weird and troublesome presence we could sense around him and the DNA test results, but it still doesn't explain why Kakashi made Naruto time travel in the first place, Minato explained, feeling uneasy. The last sentence of the message was also troubling him. What on earth was Kakashi going on about failing to fulfill his last wish? Sarutobi inhaled on his pipe and paced around the room slowly. Well, we now know how Naruto got here, Sarutobi stated. Him having the Kyuubi could be a problem though. Sarutobi looked at Minato seriously. He is your son Minato. You must keep a close eye on him and make sure he doesn't let the nine-tailed beast escape. You know what would happen. The former Hokage cut himself off and sighed, rubbing his temples. Minato went over and picked up Naruto gently, laying him over his shoulder, and he smiled at the third. Well, I'd better take Naruto home, and yes, I'll keep a close eye on him. Minato headed for the door and the Hokage nodded. Sarutobi went back to his desk as the two blondes left. When Minato reached his house, he went inside and took Naruto to his room. He had prepared it for him before he adopted him. The room was close to his own so he could check up on Naruto if there was ever anything wrong. Minato smiled as he laid the young blonde gently down on his bed and kissed his forehead. Night son, Minato whispered, the word son sounding so weird coming out of his mouth. It was strange of him to suddenly start calling someone his son, but he guessed he kind of liked it. It wasn't bad at all and he could get used to it. He only hoped that Kushina would too. Minato was in his room engaged in a deep sleep. The sun was barely up yet, and the birds were still snuggled up in their little nests, and enjoying a peaceful sleep. The yellow-clad shinobi turned in his sleep as he was now facing the ceiling and his nose sniffed the air, still on the verge of unconsciousness. Although his mind was still in a light slumber, he could smell something burning. Minato turned and shifted around in his bed uncomfortably and decided to ignore the smell. It was when the smell got to the point of where it could not be ignored any longer did the young shinobi make an effort to get up. He groaned and rubbed his head, sniffing the air again and letting out a cough. The atmosphere in his house was toxicating and Minato stepped out of bed. Something was definitely burning. Minato's eyes widened and his mind started screaming at him. Something is burning. Something is freaking burning. The first thing that came into the blonde's head was, Naruto. Minato raced out of his room, his heart beating fast. Naruto's room was next to his own and he quickly yanked the door open to find the bedroom empty. With no time to waste whatsoever, Minato raced off looking for the little blonde. His apartment was huge and the closer he got to the kitchen, the heat radiated some more. Well, now he knew what was on fire. His kitchen. Minato raced to his kitchen and found the place was in flames. Minato scanned the area quickly looking for Naruto and spotted him. Naruto was squatted down in a corner looking very frightened and he yelled out when he saw Minato. Daddy, Naruto, what happened in here? Minato quickly got the fire extinguisher and started putting the fire out as he didn't want to use up any of his chakra performing any jutsu. The young Junin sensei wondered what would be left of his kitchen after that. Half a kitchen, he thought miserably. It took less than 2 minutes for him to stop the fire, and he sighed before looking over at Naruto, hoping he wasn't hurt. Naruto, seeing that the fire had suddenly gone, ran and jumped into Minato's arms. I'm sorry, Daddy, I didn't mean to. Naruto buried his face in Minato's shirt, and the older blonde just patted his back before setting him down in front of him and scanning his body. The child was spotless. No marks, no bruises and no burns. Minato sighed again in relief and then frowned. Naruto, what were you doing? You could have gotten hurt. Minato said and Naruto lowered his head. I'm sorry, Daddy. I just wanted to make you ramen for breakfast, Naruto spoke and looked up at the older blonde with teary eyes. It was supposed to be a thank you present for you being my father. Naruto broke out into tears and Minato felt guilty as he hugged him. He just couldn't tell Naruto the truth about him actually being his real father. That would just confuse the child and also cause trouble, so it was best if he said nothing. Anyways, Naruto would be going back to the future in a few more months or so. That's okay. We'll go and eat breakfast at Ichiruka's. How does that sound, hey Naruto? Minato questioned as he wiped away Naruto's tears. Naruto slowly nodded and Minato smiled as he picked him up. Let's get ready first. The blonde walked out of the kitchen carrying Naruto and looked back at the ruins that once used to be his kitchen. As the two were walking together, they were greeted with smiles, good mornings and hellos. Minato, still wondering about what to do about his kitchen, had a train of thoughts going through his head. He looked down at Naruto and smiled and then stopped when he saw Mikoto Uchiha walking towards them with a pram and little Itachi by her side. She stopped to greet them and Naruto beamed up at her. Morning, Mikoto-chan. Naruto grinned and glanced at Itachi, who bowed slightly for Minato, and Mikoto smiled. Hey Naruto-kun. Long time, how are you enjoying your new home? Mikoto questioned and then smiled at Minato, saying her greeting. I love my new home and my new daddy. Naruto responded proudly and Itachi just looked at him. Well, that's good to hear, Naruto-kun. Minato is a great man and he will take good care of you, the Uchiha praised, and Naruto nodded in agreement, while Minato just blushed shyly. Naruto looked at the pram and frowned as he walked over to it, dragging Minato along, and then peered down into it. Inside was a small baby carefully covered up to the neck. The baby had raven black hair and was gently sucking on his little thumb as he stared up at Naruto, who was smiling down at him. Minato, too, peered into the pram and then looked up at Mikoto and smiled. "Congratulations," he said. "So what is his name?" "Thank you, but he is not my child. He is my sister's and his name is Daisuke. I'm expecting one in a few more months to come though," Mikoto replied. Naruto frowned even more and was staring at Daisuke before he gently reached down and poked him in the stomach, making little Daisuke giggle, and Naruto laughed. "I think he likes you," Mikoto stated, and Naruto grinned as he poked Daisuke again, making him giggles, and Itachi just eyed Naruto suspiciously. "Well, we better get going," said Minato, and Mikoto nodded. "It was nice seeing you again, Naruto-kun. Hope you come and visit sometimes," Mikoto said. "Okay. Bye, Mikoto-chan." Naruto farewelled as the two blondes started walking away. Mikoto waved to them, and then continued on their way. "Daddy, where are we going?" Naruto demanded as he saw that they weren't heading in the direction of Ichiruka anymore. "We are going to Kushina's house," Minato quickly corrected himself, and could feel his face heating up. Was he just about to say mommy? Is she going to be my new mommy? Naruto asked curiously, looking up at Minato innocently. Yes, she is, Minato said, his face red. He couldn't lie to Naruto, besides that was the truth. Are we going to her house so you can ask her on a date? That's what the orphanage lady said people do when they like each other. Naruto confirmed, and Minato blinked. What do they teach these kids at the orphanage? He thought to himself, thinking of an answer. No, not really. I said that I would take her out to come and eat ramen with us today, Minato replied. Isn't that the same thing, Daddy? Naruto raised his eyebrow and questioned. Minato shook his head. No, it isn't. Isn't that mommy coming this way? Naruto pointed, and Minato followed the direction he was pointing at, and there she was. Kushina was walking towards them, a smile engraved on her beautiful face, and Minato could already feel himself blushing. Hey, I was just about to come get you, Minato aforementioned when Kushina stopped in front of them. Well, I was going to wait for you a little longer, but you're already 20 minutes late. Kushina smiled as she ruffled Naruto's hair. Naruto just grinned up at her, and Minato looked apologetic. I'm sorry, Kushina. I got caught up with something this morning, the older blonde lamented, and Naruto shrunk, trying to look innocent. Kushina shrugged. That's okay. I'm still up for ramen if the offer is still open. Minato smiled at her. Sure, the offer is always open. Kushina blushed, and then smiled back at him as Naruto was looking back and forth at the two and grinned. So Minato, Kushina began as the three were walking towards the Ichiruka ramen shop. What was it that made you late? She asked, and Minato laughed, scratching the back of his head nervously as he held onto Naruto's hand. It's a long story, he answered, and the red-haired Kuniochi frowned. Make it short then, she insisted. Okay then, my kitchen was on fire. Minato, I told you that you bad cook. Did you really want to prove me wrong so badly that you got to the point of burning down your kitchen? Kushina asked, trying not to laugh. Minato, who was sitting on the far end side of the bar with Naruto sitting between them, let out a chuckle and then made a hurt face. I wasn't the one who burnt down kitchen, it was wait, you never told me I was a bad good, Minato stated. Minato never cooked a proper meal before in his life, but still, that doesn't make him a bad cook. There was this one time when he accidentally burned his pancakes, but that didn't count. Kushina chuckled as she stroked Naruto's hair and grinned at Minato. So? There was no need for me to. You just proved that by burning down your kitchen. Naruto just grinned sheepishly, knowing he was the guilty one, but he already said sorry, so he did his part. Hey, that's not fair. I can prove to you that I'm not a bad cook, the older blonde defended and pouted. He was going to prove to her that she wasn't the only good cook around with the help of Choza Akimichi's wife anyways. Oh yeah? How are you going to do that with no kitchen? Kushina asked and smirked. This was getting interesting, and she couldn't wait to see what would happen. She was teasing Minato, and she was pretty sure he knew that. She hadn't tasted anything Minato cooked before, so she couldn't be sure whether he was a bad cook or not, but she'll be finding out soon. Good point, Minato frowned. She was right. Without his kitchen there was nothing he could do, but he wasn't giving up that easy just yet. Doesn't matter, I'll find a way. I'll cook something by tomorrow and then come and pick you up to come taste it at my house. Let's say around 6:30 p.m. You and Naruto can be the judges. If I turn out to be a good cook, you'll have to admit something to me. If I turn out to be a bad cook, which I hope won't happen, I'll have to admit something to you. Minato finished off with a satisfied smirk, and he looked at Kushina, who just shrugged. Sounds good to me. 6:30 p.m. tomorrow, and this time don't be late. Kushina had a smirk on her own face as she looked back at Minato. Naruto, who had been sitting there like a good little boy and listening to them talk, looked at Kushina and then stood on the chair and leant over to Minato and whispered something into the older blonde's ear. Kushina just stared curiously, and Minato's face turned bright red and he shook his head slowly. And no, Naruto, I didn't just ask her out on a date. Kushina's face turned red and she turned to look straight ahead as Naruto sat back down, looking as innocent as ever. Here's your order. Tucci came around with a 7-year-old IM by his side, holding 3 bowls of steaming ramen as he placed one in front of each person and smiled. Alright. Naruto took his chopsticks and started eating his ramen while Kushina and Minato glanced at each other before taking their chopsticks too and doing the same. Still looking as beautiful as always, ladies. Hey there, wanna come home with me tonight? Hey, I said I was sorry. Give me a break, I didn't know you were an old lady. Ow, I said I was sorry. Geez. Minato, recognizing the voice instantly, had leant backwards in his seat and pushed the curtains aside slightly as he peeked out of the bar. Kushina did the same and Naruto, who was curious too, decided to do the same but leant back too far and fell down, landing face first. A shadow fell across him and he blinked, looking up to see a man with long and spiky white hair standing in front of him. Naruto, are you okay? Minato stood up and helped Naruto to his feet before turning to look at his former sensei. Who do we have here? Jiraiya grinned and squatted down, looking at Naruto. Another Minato? Hey Jiraiya-sensei. This is Naruto my son. Minato chuckled nervously, knowing his sensei was going to make a big deal about it, and he was right. Let me guess who the mother is. Jiraiya stood up and smirked at Minato, glancing over at Kushina. Naruto just stared at Jiraiya as he went over and placed his arm around Minato's shoulders. I see you've followed my advices very well. Jiraiya began with a laugh and Minato's face started to heat up. What advices? The young Junin sensei stammered and Jiraiya just broke out into a fit of laughter. Ah, come on Minato, don't be shy about it. You didn't even need my help after all. Heck, you even got yourself a kid. I'm proud to have been your teacher, the legendary Sannin praised himself, and Minato looked like he was about to explode with embarrassment. Kushina was blushing madly and Naruto just looked up confusingly. It's not what it looks like, sensei. Minato's sweat dropped, making his former sensei laugh even louder, making a few heads turn their way. It's never what it looks like with you youngsters, but it will be soon. Jiraiya wiggled his eyebrows at Kushina and she just glared back at him, her eyes seeming to say, don't even think about it, you perv. Jiraiya just laughed nervously and removed his arms away from his student's shoulders and looked down at Naruto. So you're Naruto? Well, nice to meet you, kid. Now let me introduce myself properly. Jiraiya sensed the Kyuubi's chakra and presence and stared at Naruto for a while. He shrugged it off and then put on a goofy grin as he got into his little introductory dance. Minato and Kushina just watched with sweat drops while Naruto's eyes were wide with interest. I'm the one and only. He whipped his hair forward and then backwards. Jiraiya. He finished off. Minato picked up Naruto and sat him back in the seat he was sitting in previously while he went and sat down next to Kushina. Jiraiya took a seat next to Naruto and then ordered ramen. So how did your mission go, sensei? Minato asked. Boring. None of the ladies there were any fun, Jiraiya groaned. Tucci came back with his order and he nodded his thanks. Well, that's a shame, Kushina muttered her sympathy. It's okay. I'm glad to be back again, even though I was greeted with a blow to my head with a handbag. Jiraiya shivered, recalling the memory. I should be going to the Hokage's officer to report my mission results, but before I do that, Jiraiya had a smirk on his face as he leaned over and whispered something into Naruto's ears. The little child's eyes widened slightly and brightly as he looked at Minato, who was glaring suspiciously at Jiraiya. Gaddy, I know where babies come from, the little blonde taunted excitedly, and Minato's eyes widened. Kushina, on the other hand, was prepared to send Jiraiya to the high heavens and back again as he faced heated up. Oh, Naruto? Where do they come from? Minato asked innocently while giving Jiraiya the death glare. Babies come from chakra. Naruto yelled out proudly and Minato just blinked while Jiraiya facepalmed himself. No, Naruto. Babies come from. Jiraiya stopped mid-sentence, seeing how murderous-looking Minato had suddenly become, and Kushina looked like she was about to put her nickname into good use. Never mind. Minato stood up and swapped seats with Naruto again. He just couldn't take the risk. I gotta get going now. See you around, Naruto, and you two love birds. Jiraiya chuckled and then stood up and disappeared in a puff, having only eaten half the bowl of his ramen. Minato just sighed and shook his head. I don't get how you haven't turned out to be like him yet. Kushina stated as she finished off her bowl of ramen. How would you know I haven't turned out to be like him already? For all you know, I could be a perv too. Minato smirked at her and Kushina just rolled her eyes. You're too sweet to be a perv, Kushina responded. Minato blushed. Is that a compliment? Figure it out. Naruto and Minato finished their ramen as Minato stood up and helped Naruto to his feet. Minato paid for the food and Kushina stood up, smiling at the two blondes. Thanks for the ramen. Kushina thanked and gently kissed Minato on the cheek, making him turn red. Why, you're welcome, the older blonde barely managed to say as he reached out and touched his cheek. Well, I'd better be going. I have a mission to go to. Kushina bent down and kissed Naruto on the forehead. Minato nodded and Kushina started walking away from them, then stopped and looked back at them. Oh, and Minato, we need to talk. You know about what? She smiled, blushing slightly. Minato nodded again, knowing what she was talking about. We'll talk about it during our little date, as Naruto likes to call it. Minato and Naruto waved by as Kushina disappeared in a puff. Well, Naruto, you don't mind staying at Makoto's house, do you? I have to go train my students. Minato looked down at Naruto. I don't mind, Daddy. I'm gonna play with Daisuke. Naruto squealed happily. Okay then. I'll come and pick you up later, Minato indirect, and then left with Naruto, heading over to the Uchiha compound. Arg. What did I get myself into? Minato yelled, running back and forth between steaming pots and balancing them, making sure nothing got burnt. Naruto was just seated cross-legged on top of the dining table, watching his dad with an amused expression, slightly frowning at how he seemed to be struggling. He could offer to help out but decided not to, remembering what he had done to the kitchen the last time. Minato had taken it pretty smoothly before, but the young blonde had no idea what his dad would do this time if he was to burn down the kitchen again. Besides, Naruto had no idea how to cook. Ow. 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 That hurts. That hurts. Minato began hopping up and down, sucking on his finger. The burn stung like hell and he wanted to yell out some pretty colorful words. Cooking wasn't a piece of cake after all. Naruto hopped off the table and went over to his dad, looking up at the older blonde. Do you need help, Daddy? Minato wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, stirring into a pot, and smiled at Naruto before replying. I'm fine, Naruto. Thanks for your offer anyway. Naruto frowned and then scratched his cheek and he said, why don't you just go and order ramen? Mommy likes ramen. Am I allowed to call Kushina-chan Mommy, Daddy? The reason I didn't order ramen, Naruto, is because I told Kushina-chan that I would cook a meal myself, and I guess you could call her your mommy. Minato blushed at that, and then went back to his cooking frenzy. Naruto just stood there for a while, watching his dad. After a few minutes, Minato turned down the fire on the pots and looked at Naruto. So how was your day at the Uchiha compound? Did you have fun? Naruto got back on top of the table and shrugged. It wasn't too bad. I had fun with Daisuke-kun and Mikoto-chan was really nice. Naruto brushed his chin and looked up in thoughts. The Uchihas don't talk much, do they, Daddy? Not much, but that's just how they are. What does HN means, Daddy? Itachi-kun used it a lot when I was talking to him. Minato scratched his temple and pouted his lips into a thoughtful manner. He didn't know much about the Uchiha language. Heck, not many people did, except for the Uchihas themselves. Well, you see, son, HN could mean so many different things. It's in the Uchiha language system, I guess. Minato laughed nervously. Naruto just sat there, grinning. The yellow-clad shinobi went back to cooking and then turned back to Naruto. Hey Naruto, do you think you can run to the jobs and buy me some ingredients? I'll write them down on a piece of paper, and you just have to show it to the shopkeeper or assistants. You don't have to, would I? Naruto jumped down from the table and beamed up at his dad. Minato quickly scribbled down a few things on a piece of paper and then handed it to Naruto, who was glowing with happiness. Here you go. Make sure to come back soon and don't get into any trouble. I won't, Daddy. Naruto quickly dashed off before Minato could say anything more. A few minutes later, Naruto was back, holding a plastic bag in his hand. He went and handed his dad the plastic bag which had the ingredients in them and then took his previous spot on the table. Sorry that took a while, Daddy. I run into Orochimaru-sen by accident. Naruto scratched the back of his head and grinned widely. Minato put the plastic bag aside and looked over at Naruto, eyebrows raised. Orochimaru, huh? Minato asked. Aha, Naruto said. Minato shrugged and then started adding the ingredients to his cooking, a train of thoughts running through his head. What was Orochimaru doing back so soon? If he remembered correctly, he was supposed to still be on his mission. It was a S-ranked mission, he couldn't have completed it that fast. Minato stopped and examined the plates of foods laid in front of him. At least he was finished. Oh, the joy of it. Now he just had to set the table and go pick up Kushina. Hey, I'm finally finished. Minato stopped when he got no reply and turned his head to see that Naruto was curled up on top of the dining table, snoring quietly. He smiled. He was too absorbed in his cooking that he hadn't noticed Naruto falling asleep. Minato quietly walked over to the sleeping Naruto and scooped him into his arms, taking him to his room. He placed the young blonde on his bed and kissed his forehead. It was a bit early for his bedtime, but Minato didn't mind. Sleep was good for kids, so he was told. Sleep tight, son. Minato whispered and then chuckled, remembering how he hated to go to bed early. He slowly exited Naruto's room and gently closed the door behind him, going back to the kitchen. It's almost time to go and pick up Kushina. Minato reminded himself as he scooped up a few plates of food, going to set them on the table when he suddenly lost his footing. Minato gasped and watched in horror as his plates of food took to the sky. All that time wasted for nothing, was all Minato could think miserably. Did you miss me? A familiar voice said, and Minato looked up to see his sensei grinning at him and holding the plates of food in his hands, which thankfully still contained the food. Minato let out a heavy sigh of relief and thanked the high heavens. Phew! You have no idea how long that took me. Minato breathed out and Jiraiya just went and placed the plates on the table before smirking at his student. Being a housewife, I see. I thought you were going to follow my footsteps. You do not know what you're missing out on, Minato, he exclaimed and then laughed, seeing the stunned look on his student's face. Where is Naruto? I came here to see the kid, Jiraiya explained, scanning the kitchen. Minato just went and got the rest of the food and carefully walking over to the dining table, placing them down before answering. He just went to sleep minutes ago. Why? Minato scowled at his former sensei. I hope you weren't planning on telling him the correct term of where babies come from this time. The blonde accused, and Jiraiya's smirk, which had never left his face, got broader. I told the kid the first time, he just didn't get it, that's all. Besides, there is no need for me to explain it to him anymore, he'll be finding out soon himself. Minato's face turned red and he narrowed his eyes slightly. What was that supposed to mean? He questioned, already getting an idea of where his sensei was going. The legendary Toad Sage had a little scan of the area before looking back at his student. Nothing. I better get going. Oh, and Minato, good luck with your date. Jiraiya walked to the front door and then shouted over his shoulder, don't forget to make the move. Minato. Ladies like those kind of things, I would know. Trust me. Jiraiya laughed, and then walked off. Minato was left standing and just blinking after him, and he could hear sensei's voice outside. Well, hello there, ladies. Minato just smiled and shook his head before getting himself cleaned up and covered up all the food. In a flash of yellow, he was gone, soon arriving at Kushina's house. Kushina opened the door when Minato knocked and walked out, all dressed up. Minato blushed at the sight of her and smiled. Hope you didn't burn down the kitchen this time, Kushina teased and laughed. Minato just shook his head and then smirked, reaching out his arm to her. Kushina took it with a blush and the two walked back to Minato's apartment. Once they had arrived, Kushina stared in surprise at the various foods laid down on the table. Wow, was all she could say as Minato pulled out a chair for her, and she sat down. Sorry, but Naruto can't be here right now. He kind of fell asleep early today, so yeah. Oh, that's okay. Minato stood up and served her the food. Remember the deal? He grinned at her, and Kushina just nodded. Minato got some food for himself, and the two began to dig in. So how was it? Minato asked after they had finished eating and he packed the dishes. Kushina had helped even though he said it was okay, but she insisted. The two now sat on around the dining table, drinking wine. It wasn't so bad, Kushina admitted, taking a sip at her wine. The food was great, and she loved it. How knew Minato could cook? Your kitchen is still in one piece, she joked, and Minato chuckled. Good. Since it wasn't a complete disaster, you now have to admit something to me, Minato grinned. This was the moment he was waiting for. He didn't know what he was expecting, but he was expecting something nonetheless. Maybe Kushina was also feeling what he had been feeling for the past 2 years. There was only one way to find out. Kushina took a deep breath and had a deep blush. How was she going to tell him? Well, it didn't matter how she told him, it was now or never. Minato, I am like you, Kushina softly said and then cursed under her breath. What the hell was that? She thought and then looked Minato in the eye, seeing that his face was turning red slowly. What I mean is that I really like you, maybe love, even. I know we have a child in the future, but I think this is how it started. Kushina spoke and Minato felt his heart beating fast. Maybe he was expecting something, maybe he was expecting this after all. Well, I love you too. Minato gently took a hold of her hand and leaned in closer. Kushina's heart was beating fast too, and she slowly leaned in as well until their faces were only inches apart. Minato decided to make the last move and leaned in more, closing the gap between them as their lips slowly locked and he kissed her. Her lips were so soft and smooth. Minato jumped slightly and then pulled away when the fridge door shut close. Naruto stood there in his pajamas, holding a carton of milk, and he smiled at Kushina and then Minato. Don't mind me, mommy and daddy. I was just going back to sleep. Naruto tired the yawn and then walked back to his room with a grin. Minato smiled and then turned back to look at Kushina, who was blushing madly, compared to him. Now where were we? Minato brushed her cheeks gently with the back of his hand before leaning in again, kissing her. Daddy, wake up. Wake up. Naruto shook Minato gently, receiving a groan from the older blonde. Okay, I'm up, Naruto. What is it? Minato sat up in his bed and yawned tiredly, stretching out his arms and looking at Naruto. Naruto jumped onto Minato's bed and looked up at him with glittering eyes filled with excitement. Remember, you promised to take me with you to training with your squad today? Naruto exclaimed excitedly. Minato yawned again and rubbed his neck, looking at Naruto in a questioning manner. Did I? Yep, and you said that I also get to train too if I'm good. Minato looked at the alarm clock on his bedside drawer and groaned. It was still only 4 a.m. He scratched his head and looked back at Naruto. Okay, Naruto, but it's still too early now. We still got about 2 to 3 more hours before we go, Minato said, smiling slightly at Naruto. The younger blonde lowered his head and pouted disappointedly, making Minato frown. What's wrong, Naruto? Minato said, somewhat worried. Naruto just looked up at him. If I go back to sleep now, I won't be able to wake up soon, and then you'll leave me behind. Naruto pouted sadly. Minato just chuckled and ruffled his hair. I won't leave you behind, Naruto. I promised that I'll take you, didn't I? Tell you what, you go back to sleep, and when it's time to go, I'll wake you up, 'kay? Can I just sleep with you here, Daddy? Naruto put on his puppy dog face and Minato just chuckled. Sure you can, Naruto. Minato moved aside slightly and patted a spot next to him. The young hyperactive blonde crawled in next to his dad, the warmth of the bed welcoming, and he grinned widely. He much preferred it here. His bed wasn't too bad and it was comfy and cozy and all, but it didn't have his daddy in it. Minato smiled and ruffled Naruto's hair before kissing his forehead. Now get some good sleep, Naruto. He pulled the blanket over the now yawning demon container, and then turned off the bedside lamp before lying back down. The room was silent for a moment before Naruto spoke. So daddy, did you and mommy make babies last night? Naruto's tiny voice questioned in the dark, his voice screaming innocent. Minato's face was as red as a tomato, and he was grateful for the darkness. No, Naruto, we didn't. The young Junin-sensei replied, and inside his head, a voice was yelling angrily, damn you, Jiraiya-sensei. He remembered what had happened last night, and that brought a smile to his face. It was probably the best night of his life, but he knew there was more to come. They only got as far as the kissing though, and after they had finished, he had taken Kushina back to her house and they had kissed there for a while before he came back. Whenever he closed his eyes, a picture of her would appear in his head. Minato smiled. I love you, daddy. I love you too, Naruto. Ah, Naruto-kun, you're so cute. Rin commented and gently pulled on Naruto's cheek, making the younger blonde grin. Kakashi just stood there with his arms crossed, and he regarded the child boredly, wondering when they were going to start their training. It wasn't the first time they've seen Naruto, but it was the first time for them to see him in the training field. What Kakashi wanted to know was what he was doing here. He was wasting their time. Sure, their sensei knew better than to bring a 5-year-old to a training field. He knew how intense their training can get sometimes. Minato-sensei, when are we going to start our training? The silver-haired genin asked, sounding slightly impatient and annoyed. Well, when Obito gets here, Minato lamented and looked over at where Naruto and Rin were. Kakashi grunted. I don't even know why he's bothering to become a ninja if he is constantly late, the Hatake muttered quietly to himself. If Obito wasn't going to take things seriously, then he ought to just quit now. He was wasting his time, and especially Kakashi's. Sorry I'm late, Minato-sensei. I had to help Mikoto-chan carry some heavy stuff to her apartment, since she's pregnant, and can't do it herself. Obito laughed nervously, and rubbed the back of his neck. Kakashi just raised his eyebrow at him. And you would know this how? Rin came over to him with Naruto behind her, and just looked at the Uchiha angrily, obviously annoyed. She told me, Obito replied with a grin. Kakashi snorted. TSK, I bet it's just one of your lame excuses. Shut up. Obito shot at Kakashi, narrowing his eyes at him. Make me? Kakashi retorted back, and Naruto just walked quietly over to his dad. Okay, that's enough, you two, Minato cut in, sensing Naruto's fear. He turned his head and looked at Obito. Obito, please try to get here on time. Obito lowered his head apologetically. Now that everyone is here, we can start our training, Minato said, and then turned to look at Naruto. You stay here, Naruto, and watch. He ordered the child, and Naruto just nodded obediently. He didn't want to get involved anymore as he saw the looks Kakashi and Obito were giving each other. The two looked like they were about to tear each other to shreds, and that made the little blonde swallow a lump in his throat. He went and sat down cross-legged on a huge rock nearby and just watched. Okay, begin. Minato's voice commanded, and soon the entire field was filled with the sound of metal against metal. Naruto watched fascinatedly, and soon his fear subsided and was replaced with excitement. Being the good little boy he was, Naruto remained where he was and didn't interfere. After a while the training had finished and the trio stood bent over, panting and breathing heavily while their sensei just stood there laughing and not even betting a sweat. Minato looked over at his students and grinned. Better than last time, I must say. You are all improving pretty fast, he stated matter-of-fact. His students just smiled up at him, exhausted, and Naruto ran over to him, jumping into his arms. Minato swirled Naruto around and grinned as the child laughed. Daddy, daddy? That was awesome. Do it again, do it again. Naruto shrieked excitedly, making Minato chuckle and Obito gawp at him incredulously. Hell no! There is no way I'm doing that again. I'm all out of chakra. The Uchiha explained and sighed with exasperation. Well, I'm not, Kakashi mentioned, and then a smug smirk slowly made its way onto his lips. Everyone raised their eyebrows at him and Minato looked slightly impressed. Obito just had an annoyed look on his face, and he crossed his arms across his chest and just observed his so-called rival. Naruto didn't like the look on the Hatake's face at all and stayed as close as he could to Minato. The silver-haired genin straightened himself up and began to make a few hand signs. That ought to show the little brat who he should fear around here. Minato, recognizing the hand signs, instantly narrowed his eyes at his student. What did Kakashi plan on doing with that jutsu? Minato thought. Slowly but surely, streaks of lighting were appearing in the palm of Kakashi's right hand, gathering up. Naruto watched with his eyes wide, and soon the fear quickly kicked in. Something flashed into his head, blood was everywhere, and Kakashi was walking towards a very frightened-looking Naruto. He had the Raikiri still formed in his hand, and Naruto glanced over at the dead man lying a few feet away from him before looking back at Kakashi. Please don't hurt me, Naruto suddenly yelled, surprising everyone, even Kakashi. All eyes flew over to Naruto. The little blonde was looking at Kakashi fearfully, and he held tightly onto Minato's vest. Please don't hurt me. I didn't do anything wrong, Naruto cried out. Minato frowned and tried to calm Naruto down. It was clear that the child was having a panic attack, but for what reason, Minato didn't understand. Kakashi cancelled the jutsu and just stood there blinking, looking very confused. All accusing eyes were directed his way, and he glared back at them, looking very annoyed. What? He demanded, crossing his arms across his chest. Hey, it's okay, Naruto. Kakashi is not going to hurt you, Minato reassured, giving Kakashi a look. Right, Kakashi? He narrowed his eyes at the silver-haired genin, and said boy nodded his head. I wasn't even planning on hurting him. Kakashi mumbled under his breath. Naruto had calmed down, and stopped crying as Minato smiled at him, and ruffled his hair. Well, training is over for today, Minato announced. He waved bye to them as he took off with Naruto, disappearing in a swirl of leaves. I can't believe that Naruto was actually that scared of you, Obito stated as the trio were parting ways and just shook his head. Why wouldn't he be? Kakashi questioned his frenemy with a smirk. I'm just as scary as anybody else, he added, and the Uchiha just rolled his eyes. Team Dobe, we've been getting reports from the villagers that kids are disappearing. It's getting serious now. More kids are disappearing every day, mostly the orphans. The third Hokage announced, a look of great concern on his face. Any idea where they might have gone or what has happened to them? Minato questioned, cocking his eyebrows. He tried to register everything the Hokage had said previously. No one knows where they are, Sarutobi spoke. Or what has happened to them. I've ordered a few shinobis to go and search for them just in case they have wandered off and got lost. These kids are still very young, age 5 to 10, 7 being the average. Most of them are Leaf Village citizens. He continued on and then went to take a seat in his chair and turned to look out the window. The sky was a clear blue color, and the sun stood up high and mighty. Even that didn't bring a smile to the Hokage's features as he turned around and looked down at the photographs on his desk. Here are some pictures of a few of them. Sarutobi picked up the pictures and handed them over to Minato, who took them with a frown. Minato flipped through the pictures, observing each and every one of them. He stopped at one photograph and his heart just sank. How small the boy in the picture looked. That reminded him of Naruto. The boy was Naruto's age, if he wasn't mistaken. Minato moved on to the next photo and stopped. Minato flipped the photo around and showed it to Sarutobi, who gave him a questioning look. Who is this? Minato asked. That's Tenzu, the Hokage began to explain. He disappeared a few years ago. Minato nodded and proceeded to the next photo, and then sighed and handed them back to the Hokage after he was finished with them. Does anyone actually know whether these kids are still alive or not? Minato questioned and ran a hand through his hair. It was just so bizarre for kids to just go missing without a trace. Why he hadn't known about this earlier, Minato wanted to know, but decided to keep further questioning on the matter for later. Nobody has any news of any kind so far, so all we have to do now is assume the best. Sarutobi replied and then let a heavy sigh escape past his lips. We need to be searching for some answers soon, he added, and Minato only nodded his head. So how's the paperwork doing? You guys became best friends yet? Minato teased with a sly grin, suddenly changing the subject. An unwanted smile crept its way onto the Hokage's face, and he gave Minato a look. You're so ungrateful, you know. You like to see me suffer, don't you? He asked accusingly, and the older blonde merely shook his head, the grin never leaving his handsome features. I was just curious, he replied, his entire body letting out an innocent aura. Sarutobi just chuckled and shook his head. So how is little Naruto doing? He is doing fine, Minato said. He had a panic attack a day ago when Kakashi was forming his Chidori, even though I have no idea why. I see. He also decided to pull a prank on me yesterday, Minato said with a frown. I hope I don't still smell like fish. He took a sniff at his clothes and let out a sigh of relief. The Hokage just laughed softly, and shook his head once again. Like father, like son, HN. Come on, Itachi-kun. We need you for this game. Naruto pouted and then stomped his foot on the ground childishly when Itachi only shook his head again for the 100th time and stuck his nose high in the air. He didn't want to play their stupid game, and no one can make him. Even though his mother had told him to go out and play with kids his own age, he just grunted. He didn't want to see his mother disappointed in him, so he just went, and was now standing under a tree with his arms crossed. He'd rather be training and perfecting his moves than playing some games. You're no fun! Naruto exclaimed, and Itachi just raised his eyebrow at him. HN. He responded and smirked when Naruto walked off angrily to go and join the other kids once again, muttering something under his breath. Itachi smiled. Peace at last. Itachi-kun is not playing, Naruto announced to the other kids who were waiting for him. We have to play a different game now, he added, and they all grunted in protest. Naruto went and got his ball from where it laid and brought it over to the other kids, a wide grin on his face. Soon the kids got into a game of ball passing and played for a while. Itachi just stayed where he was and watched them, not the least interested in joining them. After about 2 hours of playing different types of games, the kids began to leave. Some went home to eat while others just simply decided that they didn't want to play anymore and waved goodbye to Naruto. The little blonde turned his head to look at Itachi. I'll be going home too, the Uchiha said, and turned to leave. Naruto just rolled his eyes and watched as Itachi disappeared out of sight. Naruto was left to stand alone in the playground, and he sighed. His daddy had an important meeting today and his mommy was on a mission, so he had no one to play with. Naruto placed the ball on the ground and started to kick it as he headed over to Ichiraku. He could stay there until his father came to get him. He began to kick the ball around boredly, sighing now and then. He accidentally gave the ball a big kick and groaned, chasing after it. He halted to a stop when he saw someone had got it, and was holding it in their hand. "Hi, Orochimaru-sama." Naruto greeted with a huge grin as he walked over to the legendary Sannin. Orochimaru looked at Naruto and his lips twisted into a smile. "Hello there, Naruto-kun," he spoke softly. "I believe this belongs to you." He handed the ball over to Naruto and the little blonde took it, bowing slightly. "Thanks," Naruto exclaimed gratefully, smiling. "You're welcome, Naruto-kun," Orochimaru replied. He stood there watching the blonde, his snake-like eyes seeming to size up the child in a very unpleasant way. "So what are you doing, walking all alone?" he asked. Naruto looked up at him and blinked, frowning. "I was playing with some of the other kids but then they all went home," Naruto explained. "I'm heading over to Ichiraku since my daddy is in an important meeting." "I see," Orochimaru turned his back on Naruto. "I know a few kids that can play with you but since you already made plans dash." "Really?" Naruto's voice interrupted, sounding very excited and his face lit up. Orochimaru chuckled at the child's enthusiasm and turned around to face him once again, a smug smirk on his lips. "Yeah, Naruto-kun. I can take you to them if you want but I must really hurry. I have something important to do." "K," Naruto quickly said. Orochimaru chuckled again and then gestured for Naruto to follow him. He couldn't believe his luck. Naruto would be perfect for his test experiment. The fact that he was Minato's son made it even better. Just when he thought he had to go search for a child to test out his experiment on, Naruto came to him on his own accord. He looked down at the little blonde and smiled unpleasantly. And the little fool thought he was taking him to play with some kids. Itachi just watched them go from where he was and just snorted before heading back to the Uchiha compound. Naruto frowned and clenched the ball closer to his chest as he looked at the cave that was in front of him. The place didn't look inviting and it sent shivers down his spine. Surely this wasn't the place. Naruto looked up at Orochimaru with a sense of fear. "Is this the place, Orochimaru-sama?" Naruto asked curiously. Orochimaru just looked down at him and smiled before turning back to look at the entrance of the cave. "Yes, Naruto-kun, the kids are in there playing. Now come on, follow me," he said and then began to walk into the cave. Naruto swallowed and followed behind and surely, the inside looked scary just like he had thought. Lights flashed on and Naruto blinked, surprised. Soon the appearance of the cave changed and Naruto looked around at the new surroundings. The place looked like a lab or a lair of some sort. Naruto stared in awe, not really seeing the true purpose of the place. "Cool," Naruto said, his mouth opened slightly as he just looked around. "Just don't touch anything, Naruto-kun," Orochimaru inquired and continued walking, Naruto following behind him in suite. The black-haired legendary Sin opened a door and walked in. "I like this cave," Naruto commented, entering after Orochimaru. "It even has doors." "The kids are in the next room," Orochimaru said, looking over his shoulder at Naruto. The little blonde was happily looking away at the stuff, trying so hard not to touch anything. Orochimaru led Naruto to the room where the kids were supposedly at and smiled at him. "Have fun, Naruto-kun. I will come and get you and take you back to your father once it's time to go, okay?" Naruto nodded slowly, not really liking the idea of being left alone, but at least he had some kids to play with him. Where were they anyways? "Well, goodbye, Naruto-kun. I'll come back later." And with that, the door behind Naruto shut close and Orochimaru was gone before the little blonde had a chance to protest. Naruto blinked once and then twice. Looking around the small and almost empty room, Naruto frowned. Where were the kids? He wondered. Just when he was about to turn around and leave, a figure stepped out of the shadows and was looking at Naruto intensely. "Hello," Naruto greeted with a warm smile and only received a blank expression from said stranger. The boy, who was about 2 to 3 years older than Naruto, scolded at the child and just looked at him and he opened his mouth to speak. "Who are you?" the boy asked. Naruto grinned. "I'm Naruto Namikaze Uzumaki," he said proudly and then blushed. "Well, I'm not an Uzumaki yet, but Daddy says that he really likes Kushina-chan. So that means they are going to get married and make more babies just like me and be together and kiss, and do all those stuff mommies and daddies are supposed to do, and then I will become an Uzumaki." The boy just blinked and gave Naruto a strange look before his expression went blank again. "What are you doing here?" he asked sternly. "I'm here to play games until my daddy finishes with his meeting," Naruto replied, still grinning. The boy only continued to stare at him weirdly, and he just cocked his eyebrow. "Games?" he asked incredulously. Naruto nodded. "Yeah," Naruto responded and then looked at the boy. "What's your name?" he asked. Said boy frowned at him and went silent for a while before answering. "My name is Tenzu." "So where are the other kids, Tenzu-kun?" Naruto looked around, wondering if some of them were playing hide-and-go-seek since he couldn't see any of them. Orochimaru-sama said there would be some kids here to play with me since the others went home and Itachi-kun was no fun at all. He says HN? To almost everything. HN, that and HN? This. Naruto said annoyed. Everything suddenly became clear to Tenzu and he looked at Naruto. It was obvious that the child had no idea what was going on. He thought he was just there to play games with other kids. "Naruto, you need to get out of here now." Minato was going crazy. He was losing his cool and his mind. Where could Naruto have gone off to? There was not a place in Konoha that he hadn't searched. Day and night, he hadn't been able to sleep for the past 3 days. He looked worse than he ever had in his entire life. It's all my fault. Minato blamed himself. If I hadn't left him behind for that meeting, this would never have happened. But where could Naruto have gone? He would never wander off alone. Never. Maybe we should go back and return to the search tomorrow, one of the ANBU suggested. The rain is starting to pick up and it's getting dark. Soon it would be hard to see anything and we have already wandered off further away from Konoha's boundaries. He continued. In a blinding second and in a flash of yellow, Minato was in front of the ANBU and had him in his grips, eyes flashing dangerously. Go back. Are you crazy? Minato blurted out, his grip tightening around the ANBU's collar. My son is out there. For all we know, he could be starving to death. Freezing even. It's been 3 days, goddammit. 3 bloody days. I'm not going back until I find him. Minato shouted, his face heating up. Everyone around was quiet. This was not him, not the Minato they knew. He was acting so different. The rain was beating down hard on them, washing away at their bodies and no one spoke. I'm sorry, the ANBU in Minato's grip spoke. Despite his mask, they could tell he was shocked. Minato let go and turned his face away. He was furious and angry. The rain made his blonde hair stick to his face, and he brushed it away harshly, and continued leaping through the trees again. The rest of the ANBUs just followed behind him in suite, all silent and none willing to speak. Please Naruto, Minato pleaded in his head. Please be safe, please. Orochimaru-sama, are you sure this is safe? A male voice questioned. Naruto was peering out in a small crack in the door as he listened in on their conversation. His face was tear-stained and Tenza stood beside him, trying to hear what was going on as well. Of course it's safe, Orochimaru spoke and then chuckled, his voice sending shivers down Naruto's spine. Why wouldn't it be? Well, it's Minato's son we're talking about here. The man spoke again, his voice a mixture of fear and concern. Naruto still couldn't figure out who he was. He could only make out a glimpse of his figure. Brown hair, white clothing and small hat. Probably a medic nin, Naruto guessed. There is nothing to worry about, Orochimaru assured, sensing the fear of the other man. Now that I have Minato's child, none of the other kids really matter to me anymore, he stated and then began to mix some stuff. Naruto swallowed a lump in his throat. He hoped Orochimaru wasn't planning on making him drink whatever that thing was again. He hated it. It tasted worse than medicine. Why is that? Do you have a grudge against Minato or something? Why yes indeed I do. Orochimaru's eyes flashed and his tone suddenly changed. I was supposed to become the 4th Hokage after the old man. Minato had no right to that position. If I am Hokage, then I would have everyone under my mercy. He spat out bitterly. The man only nodded and continued to mix the substances. Well, how can you be so sure they won't find us here? The man asked. The legendary Sannin only smirked and licked his lips. Oh, don't worry, they won't. Not even the Hyuga clan can find this place. Let's just say I found someone who is really good at seals. Orochimaru stated, letting out a laugh. Naruto moved away from the door slowly and tugged at Tenza's sleeve. The young brunette looked down at him with a questioning look. What is it, Naruto-kun? He asked as he too moved away from the door and went to take a seat down on the hard floor. Naruto went and sat down beside him, his eyes sparkling with tears. I want to go home. Naruto replied as he fought back the threatening tears. I hate this place. I want my daddy. Tenza sighed and placed a hand on Naruto's trembling shoulders. It was easy for him. He'd lived there for as long as he could remember. It was probably hard for Naruto. 3 days ago, when he had told the blonde about the purpose of the place, he hadn't really believed him. He explained to him the reason why he was there, but Naruto still thought it was all fun and game. Tenza had tried to get the blonde out of there, but as always, Orochimaru caught them, just like he always caught Tenza whenever he tried to escape. Don't cry, Naruto-kun. I'm sure someone would come for you. Tenza said and tried to comfort the little blonde. Why, my daddy will come for me? Naruto exclaimed, wiping the tears off his eyes slowly. He'll show him. No one kidnaps me and gets away with it. Tenza had to smile at that, despite their situation. You'll have to be in good shape until he comes, now don't you, Naruto-kun? That is, if he ever comes. Naruto jumped and turned around. There in the doorway stood Orochimaru, smirking at the two of them. He held a tray in his hands and began to walk forward, closing the door after him with a push of his leg. Tenza stood up and grabbed Naruto, shoving him behind him and glaring at Orochimaru. Stay away from him. Tenza demanded, sounding a little foolish and stupid. He knew it was no use. Orochimaru only chuckled at him and continued forward. Now don't be like that, Tenza-kun. He spoke and placed the tray down before grabbing Tenzu and pushing him aside, leaving Naruto defenseless. His devil-like tongue slashed out, flicking over his lips, and he smirked. Naruto's eyes were wide and he moved back slowly. He didn't know when he had become so afraid of Orochimaru. If you hurt me, I'll tell my daddy, Naruto said in an attempt to defend himself. Orochimaru just laughed, and gently caressed Naruto's chin, making the little blonde flinch. Tenzu tried to push him away from Naruto, but Orochimaru just pushed him away. And what would your daddy do to me? Naruto-kun? Orochimaru asked mockingly. Hil Naruto was almost to tears again. Orochimaru frowned and wiped away the tears that were now rolling down Naruto's tan and whiskered cheeks. Ah, don't cry, don't touch him. Tenzu got up and charged towards Orochimaru. The black-haired Sannin turned his attention away from Naruto and looked at Tenzu. Before the poor kid had a chance to do anything, he grabbed him by the neck and held him up in the air. The brunette gasped for air and struggled to unclench Orochimaru's grip from his neck. What has gotten into you today, Tenzu-kun? You're not yourself. Tenzu only struggled some more, trying to get free, but Orochimaru had a firm grip of his neck. The kid's face was going red and it was obvious that he needed air. Orochimaru frowned and looked down as he felt someone frantically punching him. Leave Tenzu-kun alone. If you hurt him, I'll tell daddy as well. Naruto screamed out his threat as his tiny fists were being smashed against Orochimaru's legs and waist, assaulting his body. Tears were streaming down the blonde's face, and he kept on hitting Orochimaru in an attempt to make him let go of his newfound friend. How cute! Orochimaru laughed, barely feeling the punches that were supposed to be harmful to him. He threw Tenzu across the room and Naruto ran to his side as the brunette painfully sat up, rubbing his neck and breathing heavily. Now why don't you two be good little boys and try to behave, huh? Orochimaru got the tray and came over to them. He took out a needle and grinned at the two unpleasantly. Naruto's eyes widened and he swallowed. He didn't like the size of that needle and the thought of it piercing his skin scared the living daylights out of him. Let's do a little experiment, shall we? Naruto watched as Orochimaru knelt down in front of them, all the while his eyes were focused on the evil-looking needle. Who was more evil? Naruto thought. He hated needles, but at that moment, he hated Orochimaru even more. Let's see if we can still put the first Hokage's jutsu to good use. His eyes turned to Tenzu and he grabbed his arm. The boy protested but he held him tight. Make this easier on yourself. The more you move, the more it's going to hurt, so I suggest you stay still. He instructed. When the boy said nothing and calmed down slightly, Orochimaru smiled. Tenzu flinched when the cold metal touched his bare skin and winched when it pierced through it. He felt the liquid substance being injected into his body and the metal retreating. Now that wasn't so hard, was it? Orochimaru turned his attention on Naruto, who was looking at him with wide, fearful eyes. Your turn, he said and placed down the needle. He took out a small bottle cap and poured something into it. Naruto frowned. He wasn't getting the needle? Oh well. He wasn't complaining. I don't suppose you've ever heard of a bijou, Orochimaru said, more of a statement than a question. They are very powerful beasts. Great shinobis have died because of them. They seek nothing but destruction and the end of mankind. Some fight to gain control over them, while others fear them. Some people are born with the power to control them. It's called a bloodline. You have to be born with it though. Your daddy has a bloodline. He smiled at Naruto and thrust the cap that contained the liquid forward. I want to see if I could give you a bloodline, Naruto-kun. He spoke sweetly. Naruto frowned. Didn't he just say you had to be born with it? Tenzu just sat there, listening to everything. Maybe one day, you'll be able to have control over them. He continued. Naruto looked at him. It sounded like Orochimaru didn't know about the thing lurking within him. The Kyuubi. One of the so-called bijou, a demon, a monster. Open wide, Naruto-kun. Orochimaru ordered and Naruto hesitated for a second but then opened his mouth, fearful of what he might do to him if he didn't. The liquid was poured into his mouth and Naruto grimaced at the taste but swallowed anyways. For a second, Naruto thought he heard someone or something growled inside of him. Kyuubi? That's a good boy. Orochimaru ruffled Naruto's hair and stood up. He picked up the tray and headed towards the door. Good night, boys. And with that, the door was closed, and he was gone. Are you okay, Naruto-kun? Tenzu asked, a worried look on his face. Naruto turned and grinned at him. Aha and dash. Before Naruto could finish his sentence, he passed out. And so did Tenzu. The next morning, Minato was at the Hokage's tower, looking worser than yesterday. He had dark circles under his eyes and his hair was a mess. It looked like he hadn't slept again last night, the third Hokage guessed as he observed him. He felt sorry for the guy. The search party has already been sent out again, he said, looking at Minato. Even the Hyuga clan has offered a hand but they haven't spotted anything yet. Sarutobi continued with bitter disappointment. Minato, maybe you should dash, he cut himself off. Minato was glaring at him, daring him to finish his sentence. The Hokage sighed and rubbed his temples. He went and sat down on his seat and turned to face the window. Hokage-sama, a voice spoke. The Hokage turned around and saw Orochimaru standing there beside Minato, having appeared in a swirl of leaves. We are ready to send out a second search party. Jiraiya will be leading them, he informed, and the third just nodded. Orochimaru glanced at Minato and tried to hold back his laughter. The look on Minato's face was just priceless. Oh, the joy of it. He loved to see him at his misery. Thank you, Orochimaru. You may go, the third said, and Orochimaru bowed before disappearing. I should be going too. Minato said quietly than Sarutobi had ever heard him speak. Just when he was about to leave without another word, the door flew open and Kushina charged in. "Where is my son?" she demanded, her face flushed. She looked angry, dangerous and murderous even. Minato blinked and just stared at her. "Kushina?" Upon hearing her name, Kushina turned around slowly. The next thing Minato knew was that he was being held by the collar of his shirt. Kushina accused as she pushed Minato against the wall, her face only inches away from him, and she glared. "How could you? Why did you leave Naruto alone?" she demanded. She couldn't believe Naruto was missing and couldn't be found. As soon as she heard about the news, she had abandoned her mission and raced back to Konoha as fast as she could. She had grown very close to Naruto over this few months. She loved him. She was his mother, and as a mother, she felt like she was failing him. Now he was gone and God knows where he went. Kushina, I'm sorry." Kushina loosened her grip. Minato looked her in the eye. "I know it's my fault and I'm sorry. I promise I'll bring him back no matter what it takes. I'll find him, believe it," he said. Kushina let go of him. Her eyes never left Minato though as she spoke. "I'm coming with you. He is my son too and I love him as much as you do. We have a connection and I'm going to use that connection to my advantage." Sarutobi and Minato watched her as she shut her eyes close. She began to concentrate really hard, her fists clenched on her sides. And there she was, mindscape. Kushina opened her eyes and blinked. She was exactly in her and Naruto's mindscape. She began to walk slowly to where the Kyuubi was and hoping to find Naruto there. As she neared, she saw the cage and the Kyuubi. Naruto was lying down in front of the cage, the Kyuubi glaring down at him. Kushina quickly ran over to him and scooped him up, hoping that he was just sleeping and not dead. To her relief, Naruto opened his eyes when she shook him gently. He blinked once, then twice. "Mommy!" He flung his arms around Kushina's neck and hugged her tightly. She hugged him back, holding back the tears. "I'm scared, Mommy." "Where is Daddy?" Naruto asked. Kushina pulled out of the hug and looked at Naruto. "Daddy and I are really worried about you, Naruto-kun." "Where are you hiding?" she asked. Naruto looked back at her and frowned. "I'm not hiding," he said. "Orochimaru-sama won't let us leave." Kushina's eyes widened. "Orochimaru?" The Kyuubi just laughed loudly. "Stupid humans." Minato was out of the door the moment Kushina finished talking. He ignored the Hokage's yells and warnings not to go and do anything stupid and just ventured out. Of all the people, he hadn't expected Orochimaru to be the one to go and kidnapped his child. His child, damn it! He didn't care what reason Orochimaru thought he had for taking Naruto, but he was planning on bringing him back. 3 days of blaming himself, misery, and no sleep was enough. The third cursed as he stared at the door. The blonde just rushed out off and he turned to look at the redhead Kuniochi that still stood in his office. "Kushina, go and make sure Minato doesn't do anything he will come to regret," he warned, sighing and rubbing his temples. "Yes, Hokage-sama," Kushina replied. The redhead bowed respectfully to the third before disappearing out of sight. She was angry and pissed, and as she leapt after the older blonde, she thought back to what Naruto had told her while she was in their mindscape. She had barely got a chance to ask Naruto more questions of what was going on when everything began to fade away. But all that mattered was that she knew where he was. Sarutobi went and sat down on his chair and turned it around so he was looking out the window. And so his suspicions were confirmed then? He sighed and stroked his chin, blowing on his pipe. If what Kushina had said was the truth, then maybe Orochimaru was behind the disappearance of the other kids as well? Naruto woke up and slowly rubbed at his eyes. The room was dark and the only light came in from the small window high up against the wall. The sunlight was dim, and it made no difference to light up the dull atmosphere that surrounded the room. Looking around, the little blonde spotted Tenzu, who was now slowly starting to wake up himself. "Tenzu-kun!" Naruto shouted, running over to the brunette. "Are you okay?" Said boy groaned and sat up, looking around as well. "Yeah, Naruto-kun. I'm okay." He looked the child over. "And you?" The blonde nodded his head, grinning despite their situation. The brunette sighed in sheer relief and smiled. "That's good." He frowned and looked down at his arm, remembering the needle, and his face retorted in disgust. He had no idea what Orochimaru had injected into him, but whatever it was, he was sure he wouldn't like it. "We need to get out of here," he suddenly informed, getting to his feet and dusting himself off. He looked down at Naruto and tilted his head slightly. "I know you already said you're okay, but do you feel weird in any way?" he asked. Naruto frowned, looking at Tenzu in a questioning manner. "I'm talking about the stuff Orochimaru poured down your throat. Does it make you feel weird?" he clarified. He felt weird himself, and when Naruto shook his head gently, he only sighed. "Ah well, I was just wondering." He moved to the door and creaked it open slightly, peering out. The place was quiet and Orochimaru seemed to be out. They could plan their getaway now, but there was a big chance that they'll get caught again. "Mommy and Daddy are coming to get us," Naruto said, watching Tenzu. The boy blinked and turned around. "Oh, are they now, Naruto-kun? And where did you get such a ridiculous idea?" A familiar voice said from behind Tenzu, making him jump. He quickly moved back to where Naruto was standing and stood beside the younger boy, glaring at Orochimaru's figure. The black-haired legendary Sannin laughed, smirking at the frightened state of the two boys in front of him, and he moved forward, making them take a step back. Now what was it that you said about your parents coming to rescue you? He mocked, stopping in front of Naruto, and taking his small round face in his hands. I talked with Mommy, and she is going to tell Daddy that you won't let us leave. She said they are going to kick your ass and take me and Tenzo-kun back. Naruto exclaimed fearlessly, sticking his tongue out at Orochimaru. Orochimaru only chuckled and patted Naruto's head. You shouldn't be using that type of language, he said. He glanced at Tenzo and smiled, putting a tray of food down in front of the two. If you two are hungry, help yourself. He turned his back on them and started heading out. I'll be going now. There's a search party for you going on, Naruto-kun. He smirked and chuckled darkly again, opening the door and stepping out. I don't want to waste any time, now. And with that, he closed the door and was gone. Once the older male was gone, Tenzo turned to Naruto and began wiping his face off. He didn't know when he had become so protective of him. Naruto just frowned and looked at Tenzo, who shrugged innocently. What? I don't like that pedo touching you, he stated, and earned another frown from the blonde. What's a pedo? Naruto asked curiously. Tenzo blinked several times before he suddenly realized again the boy was only 5 years old. You know a pedos. People like Orochimaru, people that, he frowned. Don't worry about it anyways. Oh, okay. Naruto shrugged and then looked down at the tray of food. He was really hungry, and so he squatted down and examined the food more closely. He noticed that it was rice instead of ramen and felt disappointed. He shrugged and took the chopsticks. Taking a small amount of the cooked rice, he brought the chopstick close to his mouth and was just about to eat, when, don't eat that, Tenzo shouted. For all we know, it could be poisoned. Naruto instantly dropped the chopsticks and moved away from the food, pouting up at Tenzo. But I'm hungry, he whined. Well, better safe than dead, Tenzo inquired. Let me make sure it's okay to eat. He sighed and looked down at the food. He took the extra chopstick and got a bit of the rice. Swallowing slowly, he placed rice in his mouth and chewed for a few seconds before swallowing. He had become a big brother figure to Naruto over these 3 days, and as a big brother, he was going to make sure his little brother doesn't get poisoned. Naruto just stood there and watched Tenzo. The boy stayed squatted near the food, looking as if he was waiting for something to happen. After waiting quietly for about 2 minutes and nothing seemed to be happening, the brunette smiled at Naruto. I guess it's not poison then. Well, I'm still alive. Tenzo chuckled nervously and then picked up one of the bowl of rice and handed it over to Naruto, and then took the other one for himself. You can eat it with the soup, Tenzo sighed, nodding down at the bowl of soup still on the tray. Naruto nodded and did just that as they began eating. I still love ramen better, Naruto stated, but didn't complain more as he continued eating along with Tenzo. Are we close? Minato asked anxiously, leaping from tree to tree, Kushina right by his side. The two had decided to go on alone and let the search party continue to search. Yeah, just ahead. A few more meters and we'll be there, Kushina asked, increasing her speed to be level with Minato. Naruto said it was a cave, right? Minato asked, glancing over at Kushina. She nodded her head slowly. Yep. The two continued to leap until soon a cave came in view. Just then, Orochimaru appeared in front of them, looking at them. Orochimaru, Minato whispered dangerously under his breath, his anger rising again as his son's kidnapper stopped in front of them. Minato, Kushina. Orochimaru frowned. I've already scouted the place. Naruto isn't here, I'm sorry, he informed, cursing inwardly. So the little brat wasn't lying after all. But how the hell did he know? Don't try to play dumb with us, Orochimaru, Minato spat out, glaring at the confused, frowning-looking Sannin. Whatever do you mean, Minato? Orochimaru questioned innocently, sounding like he had no idea what Minato was talking about. So they'd finally figured out, huh? Well, gee, who would have thought? You know what we're talking about. Kushina cut in. Now where is our son? Where's Naruto? She demanded. A wicked smile crept onto Orochimaru's pale face and he smirked, looking at the duo. I already told you he is not here. In a blink of an eye, Minato was gripping Orochimaru by the collar of his vest and he glared at him, anger oozing out of him. I don't care if you're one of the legendary Sannins, Minato said through gritted teeth. If you don't tell me where you're hiding Naruto, things will get very ugly around here, he threatened. Orochimaru's smirk grew wider. A threat, huh? Well, what shall we do about that? He grinned, evoking Minato's anger even more. Gives us back our son, now, Kushina demanded, taking out a kunai. She too was starting to get really angry, and she didn't care if Orochimaru was one of the Sannins as well. Minato let go of Orochimaru and took out his kunai as well. I didn't want it to have to be like this, but you leave me no choices. If I have to beat the answer out of you, then so be it, he roared. Orochimaru laughed darkly. If they really thought they could defeat him, then they were sadly mistaken. This was a chance for him to get revenge for Minato taking over his spot as the fourth Hokage. How dare that old fool chose Minato over him? Naruto-kun is such a cute boy, isn't he? These 3 days that I've spent with him have been marvelous, he smirked, seeing the look in the young couple's eyes. Hell, they looked like they wanted to tear him into shreds. I wonder how he's doing right now in that dark and lonely room. Maybe he's dead. That's enough. And then all hell broke loose. The three shinobi glared at each other. If everything went as planned, only two of them would be leaving, and it sure wouldn't be Orochimaru. Minato. The Sannin roared, Kusanagi flying out from his mouth as he charged the kage. The blonde looked down on Orochimaru angrily, a blue orb swirling powerfully in his hands. Rasengan. Minato shouted, ducking beneath the poison-tipped blade as he slammed the sphere into Orochimaru's gut. The Sannin cried out, his body thrown several meters from the young couple as Minato quickly threw one of his signature kunai. Orochimaru's eyes widened as Minato reappeared behind him, another Rasengan swirling in his hands. The snake adjusted his body weight slightly as he flew towards Minato, and with a loud hiss, he vomited a new body, slithering away from the blonde as his old skin was torn asunder under the power of Minato's blow. Orochimaru, that technique, Minato growled, arming himself with a kunai. What have you become? Kakuku, dear Minato-kun, do you really want to know? Orochimaru asked, pointing Kusanagi at the blonde. No. The time for talking is over. Minato scowled. You kidnapped my son, that's all I need to know. With those few words he raced forward in a yellow flash, colliding with Orochimaru as Kushina flipped towards them with several chakra chains flying from her hands. Shifting through several seals, Orochimaru leapt back from the pair, forming the final seal as he landed several yards away from Minato. Futon, he cried. Daitapa, a great wind blew through the chambers/hideout/area. But Kushina was faster, erecting a barrier around herself and Minato with her chains. Kushina merely grit her teeth as the wind blew around them, leaving them unscratched. Kakuku, Orochimaru mused. Perhaps I should see if young Naruto-kun has that ability as well. Minato snarled, disappearing once more in a yellow flash as Kushina shot several chains out towards Orochimaru. You have chains, I have snakes, the Sannin hissed, releasing several large cobras from his sleeves that tangled with Kushina's chains. Taking advantage of Orochimaru's distraction, Minato flashed behind him, placing his kunai to the man's neck. Give it up, Oro, it's over. Is it, Minato? Orochimaru asked, coiling his neck around so he could glare at the man. Minato gasped as scale-like substances overcame the Sannin, twisting and warping his body until he was little more than a monster. His head had become more serpentine, twisting and gazing around the room until his snake-like eyes fell upon his prey. Dynamicase, Orochimaru hissed, coiling back in preparation to strike the blonde. TCH, Minato spat, leaping back by Kushina as several chakra coils flew out towards the white snake. Oro hissed, poison spewing from his fanged lips as he snaked between the chains. I'll kill you here, Kushina! Hold him! Minato roared, reaching for several pronged kunai. The redhead nodded as she shot another chakra chain towards the Sannin. I'll get him, the large serpent snarled, snakes flying from its lips as it slithered across the floor towards Minato. Come on, Minato scowled, his fingers racing across the kunai swiftly. SSSSAA. Oro hissed, lunging at Minato, jaws wide as the blonde looked up in shock. You're mine, Minato winced, staring as Orochimaru's fangs stopped inches above him. Kushina was meters behind him, coiling his serpentine body and numerous chakra coils emerging from her back. Stay away from my family, she ordered angrily, heaving the chains backwards and tossing Orochimaru up and away. Minato watched with a smile as Oro crashed to the ground, dust and rubble flying from the collision. It's done, he mused quietly, twirling the numerous kunai around in his hands as Orochimaru slowly slid back up. Minato glared at the man-turned-monster, and tightened his hold on one of the kunai. It's time to end this, Orochimaru. He tossed one of the kunai. Hiration. Orochimaru didn't even have time to blink. Before he knew it, his scales were covered with cuts, places where Minato had obviously torn at him with one of those thrice-damned kunai. Minato, the snake shouted, where are you hiding? Above, Minato mused, appearing above the Sannin with a powerful Rasengan charging in his right palm. Orochimaru hissed, lunging up towards the man as Kusanagi flew from his fanged jaws once more. Die! Time warp, Minato stated, once again disappearing into a flash. Orochimaru's eyes widened as he lost sight of the blonde. Where dash? Rasengan! Minato shouted, slamming the blue orb into Orochimaru's serpent body as Kushina watched on. Unlike the previous ones, this Rasengan didn't let go. It grew and grew as it continued shredding at the snake's body, until it easily took up half the room itself. Minato. Orochimaru snarled in futility, as his body was devoured in blue light. And then he was gone, sent several feet away in a heap of mess by the yellow flash of Konoha. Minato and Kushina stood there, both panting heavily. Brushes and wounds covered their bodies. Fighting one of the legendary Sannin was not an easy task and Kushina fell to her knees, coughing. Minato quickly ran to her side, looking at her worriedly. Are you okay? He asked, looking her wounded body over. Yeah, I am fine, Kushina said, slowly getting back up to her feet and smiling at the blonde. Come on, let's go and get Naruto back. Minato nodded and they continued towards the cave. I want my mommy and daddy, Naruto said, looking up at the ceiling as he stayed laid down and with his head rested on Tenzu's lap. Don't worry, Naruto-kun. I'm sure they'll be here, the older boy comforted, ruffling the blonde's hair. You said so yourself, Naruto meekly, and just pouted as he continued to stare up at the ceiling. The two froze when the door began to slowly creak open and Naruto sat up slowly. They both wondered if it was Orochimaru. The door creaked some more and two shadowy figures came into view. Neither Tenzu nor Naruto could make out who the figures were due to the lack of light in the room. Naruto? Naruto, are you in here? Came a tired and desperate voice. Daddy? Naruto? Daddy? Naruto jumped into Minato's arms as soon as he could make out their figures, almost knocking the older blonde down. Minato, realizing that it was really Naruto in his arms, wrapped his arms around the younger blonde tightly, and hugged him close to him, making sure not to hug him too tight. Oh Naruto, I'm so glad you're okay, Minato mumbled, patting the back of the now crying Naruto. I miss you very much, Daddy and Mommy as well, Naruto cried and pulled back and looked over at the second figure. Kushina smiled sweetly over at Naruto, and the boy reached out his arms to her. Mommy. Kushina's smile grew wider as she scooped Naruto from Minato's arm and hugged him. Tenzu stood there, looking over at the happy family and smiling slightly. He wished his own parent could have done that to him and rescued him years ago. He sometimes even used to wonder if he had parents. But that was just a silly thought. Of course he had parents, he just didn't know if they were dead or alive. I told you they'd come, Naruto-kun, he said, making the trio stop their family reunion and look over at him. Naruto only grinned at him happily while Minato and Kushina just blinked at him. They were too absorbed in Naruto, they didn't even notice he was there. Who's your friend, Naruto? Minato asked curiously. That's Tenzu-kun, Naruto announced proudly. Minato nodded and Kushina walked over to Tenzu. Nice to meet you, Tenzu-kun, she said, gently ruffling his hair. Yeah, nice to meet you, Minato added with a goofy grin that matched Naruto's. Tenzu nodded his head at them and smiled. Come on then, let's go. Kushina told Tenzu and the two blondes, this place stinks of substances. She frowned, walking out the door. The three followed after her, and they left the cave, stepping into the bright afternoon sun. Only then did Naruto notice the bruises and wounds on his parents, and he gasped. You're hurt, he exclaimed, pointing at their wounds. Minato chuckled and ruffled Naruto's hair, grinning. Don't worry. They are not very serious, he assured. Kushina nodded in agreement. If you say so, Daddy. Now let's go home. The four were just about to leave when Tenzu frowned. What happened to Orochimaru? He asked curiously. He hadn't seen the pedos since he brought them the meal. Let's just say, he's been taken care of, Minato answered with a small smile. Oh, now the soon-to-be Hokage grinned again. Who's up for ramen? I am. Naruto and Kushina shouted in unison. Minato was starting to panic despite what Kushina had told him. Naruto was just sick, that's all. He was a kid after all. He didn't expect him not to get sick, did he? It was completely normal, right? He ran his fingers through his hair and watched the sleeping Naruto, a worried frown on his face. Reaching out for the thermometer on the bedside table, he checked the child's body temperature for the third time in less than 10 minutes. Still high. Minato bit his lips and rubbed his hand down his face, getting up and leaving the room for the first time since he woke up. Get a grip of yourself, Minato. He slapped his cheeks with both hands and then heaved a heavy sigh. Everything is going to be fine. He went and sat at the dining table, then gazed at nothing in particular. Naruto had been sick for nearly a week now since they found him and Tenzu, but the medic said that there was nothing major to worry about. But Minato couldn't help himself. After about an hour of pacing around, checking up on Naruto and then pacing around some more, he called in an ANBU to go and get Kushina. In less than 5 minutes she was at his house. She gave him a hug and then a reassuring smile. Don't worry too much, she said. Naruto will come around. Minato just looked at her for a long moment without saying anything. I guess so. He ran his hand through his hair and his shoulders sagged. Without thinking, he grabbed Kushina's hand and led her to the living room and then sat down with her. The heat radiating from her body caused him to groan and he pulled her closer, nuzzling his face into her neck. Is there something I'm doing wrong? The question was mumbled into her neck, his heated breath sending tingles through her body. There must be something that I must be doing wrong. I've tried everything, but he won't get better. He has lost at least 5 kilos already. Kushina sighed and closed her eyes, placing her hand at the back of his head and then combed her fingers through his hair. She was worried about Naruto as well, more than she let on. Sure, she knew it wasn't something very serious, and she has been telling Minato that, but she had a gut feeling that it wasn't something to brush off easily as well. Orochimaru. The thought came to her mind without her even realizing. She gritted her teeth and her arm tightens around Minato even more. Minato seemed to have noticed her suddenly tense body, and he pulled his head back. Are you okay? You see, Minato paused and just studied her face closely. Kushina lifted her hand and stroked his cheek, smiling at his surprised and slightly curious stare. Relax, she whispered and then slowly moved her hand to the back of his neck. Relax. As Minato brought his face towards hers, she pushed forward the remaining gap and their lips melted together. Her body relaxed into the sweet and tender kiss and Minato wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her closer. Orochimaru. If that bastard had anything to do with this, he was going to pay. Kushina had heard about his experiments on kids. That creep. She would find his ass. She knew a sick, cunning snake like him wouldn't have died that easily. And then she would put an end to him. The kiss was starting to get heated and passionate, but when someone cleared their throat and alerted them, they broke up. Jiraiya was leaning against the door frame, his arms folded and a smug smirk on his face. He looked between the two. Minato looked completely flushed. "Sorry for interrupting," he said and walked in. He didn't look sorry at all, but his voice was serious. He glanced around the room. "So how is Naruto coming along?" Minato stood up and smiled at his former sensei. "Better than yesterday," he answered. The Toad Sage nodded his head in understanding. Suddenly the bedroom door creaked open and a few seconds later, Naruto snailed his way into the living room. "Daddy?" He looked dazed and about to pass out. Minato froze. Kushina was quick and before the yellow-clad could react, she Naruto in her arms. "Naruto!" She kissed his forehead and hugged him tight. Naruto gave her a weak smile and sniffed before sneezing, his eyes and nose red. Minato walked up to them and half smiled, half frowned. "You'll be alright soon, son," he assured and then frowned when the child let out another heavy sneeze. "You shouldn't be out of bed." "Sorry, Daddy." He lowered his head and wrapped his arms around Kushina's neck. Minato shook his head. "It's okay. I'll get you something hot to drink and eat." He ruffled Naruto's already messed up hair and walked into the kitchen. "Hey kid," Jiraiya said. Said kid turned to look at him and beamed. "Pervy Sage!" Naruto exclaimed. Minato poked his head out from the kitchen, blinking. "Pervy Sage?" Jiraiya blinked at the sudden new nickname, and then laughed. "You are making me sound like such a dirty rag, kid." They all looked at each other, and then burst into hysterics. "Can't deny what you are," commented Kushina. Jiraiya pouted. "Am I that bad?" The redhead shrugged. "You tell me." The Toad Sage rolled his eyes and they all laughed again. A few minutes later, Minato returned to the living room with 2 hot bowls of chicken stew and porridge. Naruto consumed both of the delicious-tasting liquids, only to end up emptying out his whole stomach again. Kakashi stopped, and then looked at the rings of symbols and signs surrounding him. He sighed and took a deep breath. What was he expecting when he got there? Would Minato-sensei be mad at him? Did he figure out what his letter meant? Kakashi looked at the signs and then slowly began to perform them, while his train of thoughts went wild. What if Minato didn't find the letter? What if Naruto didn't find them? What then? As he performed the last hand sign, Kakashi shut his eyes and hoped that everything had gone according to plan. Before he knew it, his surrounding had disappeared and soon, so did him. First he saw nothing but blinding light, and then suddenly he was in a world of darkness. "You wanted to see me?" Minato appeared in the Hokage's tower, and raised a brow at the third. "Oh, Minato." Sarutobi turned around and blew on his pipe, taking a seat. "How is little Naruto?" The blonde shrugged. "He is getting there." Minato spied himself a spare chair. "It sucks that he has about a month and something days left, and this is how I get to spend it with him. I didn't even notice until now." He threw his head back and sighed. He didn't want Naruto to go, but what were the consequences if he didn't return to his time period? And besides, he was going to have all the time he needed to spend with the other Naruto that was coming, God knows when, so why was he still feeling sad? Ah, the time travel thing. I almost forgot, which brings me back to the point, the third aforementioned, stroking his chin. "Kakashi is here to see you." Minato looked back at the Hokage and raised another brow. "Kakashi? What for? Is there something wrong?" Sarutobi shook his head and laughed. "Not our Kakashi. Future Kakashi." Oh, Minato zoned out and then blinked. "Wait, what? Future Kakashi? Was time traveling now a common thing among the people of the future?" He grinned. What did Kakashi look like now? He couldn't really be old, since he and Naruto were from the same time period. Would he be taller than him? Minato was eager to find out. "Hello, Minato-sensei," a voice suddenly interjected. Minato turned around so fast that he almost pulled the muscles on his neck, following the source of the voice. And sure enough, there was Kakashi leaning against the door frame and looking in. Minato couldn't help grinning from ear to ear. He looked so grown up. Not that that was a new case with him, but still. "Kakashi," Minato stood up and walked towards the silver-haired shinobi. He wondered what the present Kakashi would think about his future self. "What are you doing here?" It wasn't exactly the right way to welcome somebody, but curiosity got the best of Minato. "I thought you'd be happy to see me, sensei," Kakashi joked and pushed himself off the door frame, shutting the door behind him. He smiled and brushed off his former sensei's oh-so-joyful welcoming. "But if you must really know, I came for Naruto." Kakashi could not stop looking at Minato no matter how hard he tried not to make it seem so obvious. They'd left the Hokage's office on Minato's call and were now sitting in the blonde's favorite place, overlooking the village. The weather was giving them a break, the cold breeze rushing past them in a soothing manner. Minato caught his student, or former student however that worked, looking again and couldn't help but grin. "What, do I have something on my face?" he joked. Even though the silver-haired clad shinobi knew it was a rhetorical question, he still shook his head but turning to focus his gaze elsewhere. Minato stretched out his arms and rested them behind his head, lying down on his back to stare up at the sky. "Am I that big an idol in the future that you don't get to see enough of me, is that it?" he asked again, a sheepish smile playing on his lips. He sort of felt uncomfortable and nervous however, even though he knew he shouldn't be. Having Kakashi also grown up was not something he was expecting. A broad grin replaced the smile he had. Since when was that a different case with Kakashi? The kid was always acting like a grown-up, taking on obstacles and problems that were beyond his years. Have you read the letter? Kakashi asked. He didn't want to think about the future. Not now, especially when he knew everything that was going to happen, the inevitable fate that was waiting for his sensei, and the village of Konoha. But what difference did being in the past make anyways? He couldn't change anything even if he wanted to, no matter how tempting it was. The consequences of messing with what were to be, or what had already been, were not something he was prepared for yet. And the thought of leaving everything the way it was not as forgiving either. Minato sat up suddenly, much to Kakashi's surprise. His face was blank, void of any expressions that gave away what was going on through his head. The silver-haired shinobi stood, too, and looked at his former sensei, a worried look on his face. Did that mean that he hadn't read the letter? Or was he mad at him? Minato sighed and ransacked his fingers through his hair, seeming to ponder something. The letter, what was written in it again? It said so much but still left so many unanswered questions. Are you hungry? You must be hungry. Let's go and get a bite and then we can talk. Kakashi stared at Minato long and hard. Then he nodded his head. Well, I haven't eaten anything yet, he said, not knowing the direction of this conversation. If Minato was mad, then he sure as hell was doing a pretty good job of not showing it. Kakashi would have to handle it somehow if he was, but he didn't seem mad, just rather confused. They left the mountain in the blink of an eye, appearing in Ichiraku Ramen store. Minato pulled out a stool and sat down, Kakashi following in suite. When Tucci came to take their orders, he froze. His eyes scanned between the two, lingering a second longer on Kakashi, who had his head slightly lowered. After a minute later, a broad grin took over his face. One of these days, Minato, he shook his head and smiled. I wouldn't be surprised if you show up here with a twin of mine. Minato chuckled. Who's your friend? Tucci asked, nodding towards Kakashi. Minato scratched his head, possibly wondering how he could explain this. This is Kakashi uncle. I'm Kakashi's uncle, Kakashi finished off. The blonde furrowed his eyebrows and gave the silver-haired shinobi a sideways glance but decided to play along anyways. If he wanted to play the uncle, then so be it. That was probably the most reasonable explaining anyways, but he was pretty sure it was still going to raise some doubts and questions. Yeah, this is Kakashi's uncle. His name is Takashi. Minato confirmed with a smile. Tucci didn't seem the least bit convinced as he raised an eyebrow. Still, he smiled and nodded his head. It's a pleasure to meet you, Takashi. I'd say Kakashi gets his looks from you, huh? He chuckled. So what may I get you two today? They ordered up, and as they ate and chatted to Tucci, Kakashi gathered his thoughts together, getting prepared for the talk. Why so tense, Kakashi? Is something the matter? Minato glanced at said person with concern. They had left the ramen store and were now headed to his house. He wondered how Naruto was doing. Kakashi sighed, keeping his gaze fixed on where he was going. People stared as they walked past, but none stopping to ask questions, just curious eyes following them as they go. Just nervous, he said. Minato laughed heartedly, causing Kakashi to glance at him. Why? I haven't asked or said anything yet, but once you hear everything I'm about to say, that'll change, he said. Once Minato heard everything, he wasn't just going to be mad. The guy was going to be furious, if not downright dangerous. Is it about Naruto or the future in general? He asked, coming to a halt. Kakashi continued to walk only to come to a stop a few feet away. Both, he answered. Once they reached Minato's house, the blonde just walked in. He hardly used the security jutsu anymore, not now that Kushina visited frequently. When they entered, 3 pairs of curious eyes turned to look speculate them. Daddy? Naruto ran towards the older blonde, coming to a sudden stop at the sight of Kakashi. Eyes wide in horror, he backed off, tripping on his own foot. Naruto! Minato lunged forward, catching him before he could hit the ground. Kushina and Tenzu came up to join them, both wearing worried expressions. The child clung to the older blonde's neck as he observed the new companion. It's okay, Naruto. I won't hurt you, Kakashi said soothingly. That guy won't hurt you either. Not anymore. What guy? Minato demanded as he held on to Naruto. His eyes narrowed at Kakashi as he waited for an answer. What's going on? The Hatake sighed. See what I meant? And I haven't even told you anything yet. Kakashi? Kushina walked up, her eyes roaming over his body more than 5 times. Her expression held a look of disbelief. You're so grown up, Kakashi laughed. Hello, Kushina. How you feeling, Naruto? The older blonde asked. Naruto cast a weary look at Kakashi before turning to look at his dad. Better, he answered with a smile. Minato observed him. He did look better, although his face was still slightly pale, his nose reddened and his eyes sunken. He grimaced. It hurt him to see his son like this. Turning to look at Tenzu, Minato smiled. He had planned to go and adopt the child today now that Kakashi was here. He knew he'd be busy for a while. It was his original plan to adopt him a long time ago, but as soon as they'd gotten back from finding them too, Naruto had fallen ill and his hands were just too full. How you doing today, Tenzu? He asked. The child's eyes were glued on Kakashi but dropped to look at Minato as soon as he heard him speak. I'm fine, Just worried about Naruto-kun, he replied. He'll be fine, Minato assured. I'll be fine, Tenzo-kun. Naruto exclaimed also, nodding his head before a sneeze escaped him. Minato sighed and rubbed a hand down his face. He placed Naruto down, and then ushered the two towards another room. You two go and play. I'm just going to have a word with Kakashi, he said. The two nodded and left. Minato then turned back to Kushina and Kakashi who were looking at him. He offered them both a smile before leading them into the living room. I can't tell you everything, Kakashi said once they were all seated. Because I know you'll try and change some of them. Minato nodded. The future couldn't be that bad, could it? What could be worse than what the letter had already said, about him sealing the nine-tailed demon fox into his own son? He was pretty sure he could handle it, if you say so. But first, I want to know what that guy you were talking about is, and why did he want to hurt Naruto? Kakashi nodded. Fine, but it's a long story and you are not going to like it. And it all started when the Kyuubi attacked. What if Naruto disappears with Kurama return 5-year letter? And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel, and leave a like if you guys need the next part. Comment down and thanks for watching the video, and see you guys in the next video.